You're watching BCTV. We're all about Brantford. You're watching BCTV, Brantford Government Television, a service of Brantford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Brantford.
Good evening. We'll call this meeting of the Brantford Planning and Zoning Commission to order. It is Thursday, March 5, 2020. I'll introduce members of the commission and staff. To my far right, we have Commission Member John Lust. Next to John, Commission Member Joe Chadwick. Next to Joe, Commission Member Joe Valluzzo. Turning the corner, Commission Member Fred Russo. Next to Fred, Commission Member Paul Higgins. To my left, Commission Member Marcy Pelusi. Our staff this evening is our Town Planner Harry Smith, and next to John, next to Harry is our engineer, John Hepburn, and our clerk recording secretary, Michelle Martin, is in the corner. I'm Chuck Anders, chair, and I'm going to ask our secretary to read the notice of public hearing.
The Planning and Zoning Commission of the Town of Brantford, Connecticut hereby gives notice of a public hearing to be held on Thursday, March 5th, 2020 at 7 p.m. at the Brantford Fire Headquarters, 45 North Main Street, Brantford, Connecticut, to consider the following. 1. Application number 20.1.4, special exception for warehouse wholesale business located at 61 East Industrial Road, RCR Enterprises LLC, care of Christopher Russo, applicant and owner. Item number 2, applicant number 20-1.8, special exception for an accessory structure, accessory apartment, located at 113 Sunset Beach Road, David Rim, applicant and owner. At said hearings, all persons will have the right to be heard and written communications will be received. A copy of the application is on file in the Planning and Zoning Commissioner's office at the Planning and Zoning Department, 1019 Main Street.
Thank you, Marcy. We'll follow our normal format for public hearings. The applicant will go first. Please grab a microphone or go up over there at the podium. Make your presentation. After the applicant is done, we have a summary of the staff report, questions from commission members and staff. Then we open up to the public. We ask you to come forward, state your name and address for the record, make your comments, and then we allow the applicant to respond to any of the public comments. We may or may not finish the public hearing, depending on how it goes. We do also have copies of the agenda and some staff reports up here in front of us. So we will now commence with our agenda. We decided to put the, we have a number of 824 referrals on the agenda. They're first on our agenda. So we'll start with item number 1, which is the 824 referral for Crescent Bluff property acquisition, road acceptance, and associated drainage. And I don't know who is going to present that, but looks like our first selectman and attorney.
You can hear him. How you doing? Jamie Cosgrove, first selectman, joined today with Ted O'Hanlon, the attorney representing the town in this matter. You may recall we came before this commission back in the summer as we were moving forward with a condemnation of Crescent Bluff Avenue. During that meeting, we withdrew it at the time and entered into discussions, I should say, with the property owner. And the attorney here can speak to any, if you want to, how we got to where we are today, but really just overview is we are now here before you because we are coming before to seek approval to purchase Crescent Bluff Avenue from Pine Orchard Road approximately to the end of the paved section, to the end of the cul-de-sac, full width of the right-of-way, following the curve of the cul-de-sac, as well as have a drainage easement where we have an existing drain pipe in place. So that is the limits of the acquisition. This was entered into court as part of a, lack of a better term, a global resolution with other matters that not only the town was facing, but there was other matters before the courts that had other parties involved in that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Attorney O'Hanlon and be happy to answer the questions.
Thank you. Ted O'Hanlon from Robinson & Cole. I've been representing the town in these negotiations. The settlement that we reached calls for the town, as Jamie said, to purchase the road itself, which is actually defined as the historic roadway. It's the 20-foot paved section and 10 feet on either side as a right-of-way to allow for repairs and and maintenance and the like. Underneath the road, as you may know, I mean, historically the town believed it was a town road. There's a sanitary sewer under there, there's a storm drain, and a number of utility lines. So when the court ruled just before Jamie took office that it wasn't a town road because it had never been properly dedicated, it put the town in a curious posture. One, it was tactically disadvantaged in the litigation, but mainly from the town's perspective, the ability to provide for the health and safety of the people living along it, and to do what the town is supposed to do in maintaining a road, and those systems was threatened. The town had to wait until that litigation was resolved because the value of that road, if it took it, was going to be determined by the rights of the people in it. So there was some time where we had to wait for the case to resolve itself. In the meantime, it began to look like the town would have to move forward on the taking. And at the same time, the neighbors had brought a petition action under an arcane statute that provided that a committee could be assigned by the court to tell the town what it should take. And there was a desire by some to take, as the town had thought at one point, we came before you last year, to take the lawn as well. So, these three actions posed an enormous cost to the town in terms of fees as well as risk in terms of not being in control of its destiny. If the committee voted to take more than the town needed, the town was going to either have to appeal that or accept it. The litigation was going to continue. And the condemnation was going to be expensive, as when we were here last summer, the owner was challenging the need for the town to take the property. So again, it was just, everything looked like it was a grand fight ahead and little hope. But when we came before you all last summer, that was actually the event that turned everybody back towards it. Jamie approached the owner. The owner was receptive to selling it. We entered in negotiations that took about 6 months. There were formal appraisals. The cost that the town is paying the owner is $200,000. And suffice to say, with this background I've just given you, the town was going to spend that much in litigation fees without being able to control its result. So here it's managed its destiny. It's kept the cost down. The price it's paying is very close to what the appraised value of the roadway was by the town's own estimate. The delta between those two was about $600,000. So that alone, I think, was a substantial win for the town in terms of what it's paying. But I think it's a win for everybody because Jamie made it clear that the town was not going to do this as in a way that was going to fund anybody's role in the fight. It gave the parties the impetus to put their heads together and come up with a resolution of how their access to the sound and all could be resolved. And fortunately, the way the agreement is the town is getting a easement across the lawn to maintain an existing storm drain that's been there for years. That storm drain is exactly where the rights of access worked out in the agreement are. So it works out for the neighbor whose property is burned. It works out for the neighbors who have the benefit of reaching the sound, and for the town to be able to access that pipe. So I think it's a win-win-win for everybody, and so we've been asked to come before you and find specifically that the town's access of reacquiring the roadway, the feet of the roadway, so that it can continue to maintain the road and the systems in it, is consistent with the town plan of conservation and development, and we believe it is. So we'd ask that you vote to approve that, so it can move to the RTM and back to the selectmen for decisions.
And this gets rid of all the litigation? It's a global settlement?
The litigation was a global settlement. It was the dispute over access rights that was in the complex litigation docket in Hartford. It was a petition action that was filed in New Haven that the court had started. We actually began to have hearings here, and those were put on hold. So, and then it relieves the town of the obligation to, and the burden of moving ahead with the taking.
And all the property owners have signed off on it?
They signed off on it. It was reported to the court as a settlement.
I assume that's what a global.
Right.
Yeah. And the court's given us until May to get these approvals in order and close it.
Questions from commission members? Staff comments? Okay. Hey, Mr. Hanlon, just a question. Have you ever heard, you referred to the arcane statute that you can appoint, the court can appoint a committee to lay out a road. Have you ever heard of that being used before?
It's been used, we did some research on it. It's been used twice in about the last 75 years. It's never reached the appellate of the Supreme Court.
Right.
These are some Superior Court decisions, but I mean, it was obviously enacted at a time when the towns were in the process of development. One of the cases that dealt with it, though, actually there was a road in place. Another one, it was somebody wanted to actually build a new road, but it was just not clear how it was. That alone was going to wind up in the appellate courts.
And I suppose that is one of the features of this particular situation that distinguishes it from other private roads, for example. When someone says, well, why doesn't the town take over my road? Or I don't know if there would be desire to do that, but this seems to be pretty unique.
I would say it's pretty unique, particularly given the defect in title that brought it about, and the fact that, you know, the town was left with everything but the right to control the systems that it had put in place underneath this road. So.
Sure. Any other questions from anyone? It's not a public hearing, but does anyone have anything quick to say? I don't see any, so, okay, great. Maybe what we'll do is we'll go through all 4 824s and then we'll act on it. Second one is a referral for Creek Court property acquisition. Who's going to speak on behalf of the town now?
John Hefferly, Town Engineer. Nice to meet all of you. Creek Court, if you're not familiar with where that is, it's off of, if you go south on Montouise, past Lenny's, you kind of make that bend on the Limewood. Your second left would be Waverly Road, Waverly Park Road. Creek Court is a private road that is right before the bridge that accesses about 24 homes or so further uphill from there. This property is one of the lowest lying properties in town. It does fall below the CJL, the coastal jurisdiction line, which is DEP's jurisdiction line. Just give you an idea that within the rest of town, there's only about 4 structures that fall below the CJL. You know, in this area, there's quite a few, almost, you know, about 21 structures that fall below the CJL. And for that reason, I think when we had the Coastal Resilience Plan in 2016, the consultants, the town staff, and some of the public had recognized that this is an area that we should really focus on for acquisitions among other kind of resilience efforts. But this being one of the lowest properties in town, again, you know, this is one of those that we thought would be a good property to acquire. That kind of presented itself earlier this year. The owner approached the town about acquiring this property. We felt that it would be a good resilience effort. This property was substantially damaged and sandy, had about 7 inches of water over the finished floor, about 31 inches by the account at the time of water from the ground level up to the mud line that was recognized on the house. Well, that was a pretty substantial disaster. That was not a 100-year storm as defined by FEMA. That 100-year storm would result in about 8 feet of water from the ground level up. It's an elevation 12 is what the FEMA elevation, 100-year elevation is. So in order to, excuse me, in order to bring this house into compliance, which is required under the substantial damage recognition, this house would have to be raised about 9 feet to become in compliance with those regulations in our local ordinances. Given the opportunity that we have, again, it presented itself. We recognized the Coastal Resilience Plan of 2016, and then, you know, the POCD also recognizes, you know, promoting the resilience, conservation of natural resources. You know, this property would be bought, the house would be raised, and this would become open space of the town. And then accounting for sea level rise, it's also in the POCD. Really looking at this property, again, being below the CJL, we recognize that there's going to be issues daily with tides in that area, as well as the impacts of a major coastal storm. I think this is really in line with the resilience efforts that we've been looking at as a town and funding as a town. We're asking for your 824 referral on this.
Thank you. Any questions for our town engineer?
I just have one question. Does someone still live there, or is that vacant now?
That's, as far as I know, as far as the town knows, it's been vacant since Sandy. It was substantially damaged, so it wasn't in a livable state. Under that substantial damage moniker, they're not allowed to really do anything with the property. They can't paint the property, re-shingle it. They have tried to do some work, and we've written letters to them, you know, stopping work on it, really referring them to that substantial damage that was filed on the land records.
Thank you.
Harry, any comments?
No, I mean, there's, no, I mean, I think this does follow upon discussion the commission's had during the development plan of conservation development in terms of, as John mentioned, coastal resilience. It does provide some small area for a tidal marsh to start doing upland migration, which is recognized as part of coastal resilience and a way to address sea level rise. Substantial portions of the tidal marsh are probably going to be inundated and lost, so this is one little opportunity to start enhancing that. And it is an opportunity that's right before us now, so that's pretty much all I have to say.
Great, thank you. Again, not a public hearing. Does anyone have any comments on this one? Yes, sir?
Good evening. My name is Kurt Schwanfelder. I live at 85 Mill Plain Road. I'm a town resident, but I'm also your town treasurer. And I come before you because there's a number of questions that were raised last night at the selectmen's meeting that were never truly answered. Number one, the urgency for having to purchase this parcel of property, which basically is a useless piece of property. You're talking about a parcel of property that literally is about the size of from this table to you folks. So the mitigation of that is so minor versus what you have in that area is, excuse me, John, but I found this morning from a resilience commission that's there, there's 34 houses in that direct area that are at the 2-foot level. So what you're looking at is you're looking at one house on the creek that's going to make little difference whatsoever. The house was sold in 2015 for approximately $60,000. Nothing has been done to it. Because we have supposedly some sort of ability to be able to purchase this property right now, does not fall into having a greater plan for our resiliency. We also need to look at what areas in town truly need to have resiliency done to them. Look at Boston Park is a perfect example. You take from the intersection of Linden and South Montouise and Sybil, take that area right there over to the Owenego, floods constantly. You have all of Boston Park, which is well over 400 houses down there, that is literally cut off and turned into an island. You have this one house that's being discussed tonight, which is on the backside of Sybil Creek, which will give you nothing in relevance to what you're trying to do as far as any sort of resiliency is concerned. If you want to do resiliency, which I think is a marvelous thing to do, needs to be done on a much larger scale. It needs to be looked at as to how many properties need to be taken, what actions need to be done, where is the most urgency in the town to do this. And then at that point, figure out what your costs are going to be. And if you need to, take it to either the state or the federal government to work with FEMA and everybody else that's necessary so that you can get the resiliency that you need to do. Spending $125,000 on a parcel of property of this size here, and then we have not even been brought to our case, what is it going to cost us to raise this property? Where the money is going to come for that? I have to sign off every week on the expenditures that this town does. Watching these type of things needs to be done better. I want you to take that into consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments? Great. Do you have any additional comments, John?
Just that, you know, with that 2016 plan of coastal resilience, you know, we've started to implement some of those plans, one of them being Linden Avenue. Thankfully, I wasn't here for the event, but probably most of you were, if not all of you, when that road washed out. You know, we've been trying to implement those plans incrementally, as it is a plan. It is laid out. The priorities may not be laid out for the town to follow, but it is one of those. It's a plan that we're taking great consideration into, and this being one of those areas, and again, the opportunity being here now. You know, the risk is, you know, the person who owns this property trying to develop this, and us losing the opportunity to purchase the property in the future, and turn it back into a really open space and a buffer for the neighborhood.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Okay, then we'll go then to the third 824, which is 497 East Main Street Sanitary Sewer Easement Acquisition. And Mr.
Yep.
Paffern, are you, John, are you going to speak on this one?
Yes. This one and the next one as well.
Okay.
It's a busy night for me. This sewer easement is for existing sewer services. It's up towards Leeds Island on East Main Street. Pave Lane is a mobile home park that's kind of perched up on the corner of Leeds Island. That feeds into this main, as well as the Shoreline Mobile Home Park feeds into this main. The sewer main has been in the rear of this property. This is all kind of prompted by a land transfer, sale of the land. We're kind of using this opportunity for the sale to gain an easement over the sewer that doesn't have a benefit of an easement right now. However, what goes along with that is the subordination agreement. This property has some contamination in the rear of the property. As a condition of the sale of the property, DEP is requiring an environmental land use restriction, basically laying out the steps you would have to take to responsibly handle any contaminated soils back there. Part of the soils have been remediated about 3 feet down. However, our sewer is about 7 or 8 feet down in that area. So if we were to dig back there, we would have to, whether or not we had this subordination agreement in place, the town would be responsible for properly handling that soil, disposing of that soil. Again, we're using this opportunity to gain the easement, knowing that those kind of restrictions would be in place either way. We'd have to take care of that soil one way or another.
And right now there is no easement. It's just sitting in the ground.
There is no easement. This would be the sole benefit of the town to be able to enter the property need be and maintain and repair that
Okay.
line. Mm-hmm.
Great. Any questions or comments from commission members, staff, public? Have any comment? Okay, then let's move on to the fourth 824, which is the Cosgrove Court Road acceptance.
Cosgrove Court, if you're not aware, is off of Todd's Hill Road. If you take Cherry Hill up to Todd's Hill, there's a small subdivision, 12 lots it appears, with a cul-de-sac, short cul-de-sac that enters into the property. The engineering department, myself as the assistant town engineer at the time, had inspected the installation of the road base and all of the storm sewer and sanitary sewers. Since then, the current assistant town engineer, Jen Aquino, which I'm sure you're familiar with, she has taken over the inspection responsibilities through final completion. I believe this has been inspected by the ZEO as well, and everything within this right-of-way does meet all the specifications as laid out in the plans. So at this point, we're recommending that the road be accepted.
Thank you. Any questions from anyone? Any member of the public wish to comment? Okay, so why don't we then take these up in order. First one was the Crescent Bluff property acquisition road acceptance. Again, under 824, what we're doing is we're simply looking at this for whether it's consistent with good planning. And typically we refer to the plan of conservation development or other items. Is that correct, Harry?
I mean, typically that's what the commission does. I mean, there's no requirement in the statute that you actually look at the plan, but you're actually acting as the planning part of the Planning and Zoning Commission. So that's typically what's referred to. Any other plans and proposals the town has adopted for the future, you can consider all of that, and also your judgment.
And it's typically for acquisitions or sales of property. And if we give a negative referral, then I think they need a 2/3 vote to do it. So that's the rules. So anyway, first is the Crescent Bluff. Comments?
They need a 2/3 vote at the RTM level?
Yeah, they would need a 2/3 vote. And I guess I should say this, it's probably the 5 regular members that would vote on this one. Yeah, they would, if we said no, we gave a negative referral, they could still do the acquisition, but they would need a 2/3 vote.
We're only to look at the planning aspects, not
Yeah,
the financial aspects.
correct. We don't pass on the financial stuff. So it's good to have a road. I mean, I guess the thing that came to my mind, it's obviously there's a number of issues with the Crescent Bluff. It's been in litigation, and the town's been a party to the litigation. So I guess from that point of view, it's good to have a finality and termination about it. And I guess the town had assumed that it was a town road. So this puts us in the position that we thought we were to maintain that. So it's good to have the legal right to do that. It's good to have the easements, have everything in place, to have the certainty of that. And then, providing for proper infrastructure for the town is part of what we do as a planning commission, roads and so forth. So, it seems like a good thing. The one thing I was concerned about is someone's going to say, oh, there's other private roads in town. Well, why don't you take my road? Pay me to, find out who the owners are of the underlying, because there are a bunch, and you should do it there. But this seems to be so unique.
Well, this is different. We're
absolutely
invested in it. We have utilities in it, and that makes it a health and safety issue.
And there was a question of public access too, wasn't there? People using that situation.
Yeah, and that's worked out with them. In other words, I don't see this as a case where the town is, paying to solve a private dispute. I think this is one where the town has a vested interest in the road, and there's so many unique things about this. I don't know of any other roads where we've been petitioned this archaic statute to lay out a new road, and so anyway, it's probably a good thing. So I mean that's why we on board with that.
I concur.
Okay, I guess everyone's good with that. So, okay, so I think we need a motion for a positive 824 referral with respect to the acquisition and road acceptance and associated drainage easement for the Crescent Bluff area property and easement area.
So moved as presented.
Okay, so motion made by Marcy. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Joe. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that one's down. That positive referral is on that one. The next one is the acquisition of the Creek Court property. And I think what we heard on that was that there is it's right by the river. What's
Off of Waverly?
Sybil Creek.
Sybil Creek, and it's flooded. It was damaged in Sandy or Irene, one of those two. And and I guess it's up for sale. It's an opportunity for the town to purchase that.
I'm familiar with the area and the property.
Yeah.
And there are several homes in that area that would be also prime candidates. It's a very, very low area. Never should have been built on. The creek is rising. The creek is fed through tidal gates, but what you have to realize is that the roads that run out to 146, like Waverly Road and like that, they go right up to the sound. And in the hurricanes, the water no longer comes through the tide gates in the creek. It comes right down Waverly Road and Crouch Road, and it'll bring that creek level right up to ocean level. And it's an area that the town has looked at. Janet Plesiak and I looked at that whole area after Sandy, and we were hoping for some grant money because we thought at that time that FEMA would purchase a bunch of these properties, but we got no interest from FEMA. But that's really what has to be done over time. It is one of the lowest areas and most vulnerable areas in Brantford.
Sure.
I'm not really, a little bit of a devil's advocate on this. I agree that we need to start addressing the feasibility plan and that it's the lowest level and that that's a major concern. That the two things that I guess question is, one, how developed is our feasibility or, plan and evolved to quantify what the expenditure is actually going to be. And I was troubled by the fact that for such a small lot that was purchased in 2015, buyer beware about the elevations.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like if it was purchased for 60, why are we paying 125? Now, I know that's not in our purview, but that did give me some pause. So I'm a little on the fence
Sure.
about it.
Hey, any other Joe thoughts?
I don't know the area at all, so I can't, it's hard for me to comment on something I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, my thought is that you shouldn't have houses in areas that are going to be flooded. I mean, that's sort of the basic thing. So the options are you elevate it, or someone buys it and elevates it and so forth, tries to strengthen it. But ultimately, it's probably a good thing for not to have houses, dwellings in places that are going to be flooded. I mean,
Well, yeah,
it's sort of basic.
You're
and
putting people in harm's way.
You're right.
Right.
And one tool of doing that is to, through acquisition, voluntary acquisition. So I think it is consistent with our plan of conservation development and the coastal resiliency elements of what we're looking at. And I'm not discounting the financial stuff. I think those were fair points, Mr. Schwanfelder.
Absolutely.
Whether it's good, whether we're paying too much, whatever, those I assume the RTM is going to consider that. But I think from our point of view, from the planning point of view, I think it makes sense. I think it is consistent. So, and two things can be true. It can be true that that we need to do more and have a more solid plan, but it can also be true that this may be an opportunity to do a good thing that's consistent with the plan, even though we haven't done the other stuff. I mean, we should still do it.
Well, it's the start of the process.
Right. Yeah.
Can we give a positive referral with our comments about the cost?
I think we can give a positive referral and from the planning point of view, and I think this is all public, so anyone could
Right.
note that I would not want to make it part of the motion. I mean, I wouldn't want to
Right.
have, but I think.
Well, I'm
that-
just curious how that price was arrived at, because, I deal with real estate all day long, and it's inconsistent with, the planning side of it's clear.
Right.
And if that's part of a bigger plan, this is setting a precedent, and I would hate for the town.
I agree that the price sounds a little high. I don't
Yeah,
know how it is
So
negotiated.
it's not that I'm opposed to the concept of
Right,
purchasing it, it's more that I'm
Right.
opposed to the price and not being price gouged on 32 other properties that, when the time comes, if there's damage and,
Well, it's the first piece of property, and that's going to set the precedent.
That's my concern.
And
Yeah.
if you don't buy the first one at the right price, or what it's really valued at, or below that value, then it's going to, you got to worry about the other 21 properties. John, seems like you have.
If I could,
Sure.
we did hire, the town had hired an appraiser to do a fair market value assessment on this property, and the appraisal did come at 125.
So that was the town's appraiser?
I'm shocked.
Yes. Now, I know, again, it's not necessarily in the purview, but just to answer the question, yeah, there was an appraisal done on that property.
Who did it, do you know?
I can't remember.
Okay.
Was it done with the assumption that it would be a habitable structure, or was it done with the assumption that it would go back to raw land?
I'm not sure what their process was. As a certified appraiser, they did their thing.
Because it sounds like it's that he appraised the size of the house for what, house to house, what you would purchase, and that's not our purpose, to buy a piece of land to inhabit the house. The purpose is to clear away space to prevent, to improve the area for the floodways and so forth. So it's usually raw land. I mean, we'll start at a new build lot that hasn't been approved at 60 to 65,000. So when they said they purchased it in 2015 for $60,000, that made sense. And then when they went to the other number, it's, so I would just want to look closer into that. But I don't necessarily want to prevent a decision being made either, because I think, the concept is okay.
Right,
It's not wrong to make the person whole, even though they made ostensibly a dumb purchase. But we don't want to sort of wink and nod at, this is the start of the gravy train.
Right.
Okay, well, I think our choice is we make a positive or a negative referral. I think, and I think our public comment is here for the record, and anyone could watch it. So I think those are fair concerns. But with that said, someone want to make a positive 824 referral or a negative 824, whatever someone wants to make with respect to the Court Creek property acquisition.
I'll make the positive referral based on the consistency with planning goals.
So there's a motion by Joe. Is there a second? Second by Joe. Any further discussion? All in favor? Say aye.
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 Yes, aye.
Opposed? So that's unanimous. Okay, great. Thank you. The next 824-01 is 497 East Main Street sanitary sewer easement acquisition. I mean, is this a layup or what? We don't have one now. It's sitting in the ground and we get one. So that's a good thing, right? Okay. Someone want to make a positive 824 referral for 497 East Main Street sanitary sewer easement?
So moved.
Moved by John. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Marcy. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And finally, we have Cosgrove Court Road acceptance. I think that's also correct. The expectation is this is going to be a town road, and that's how we approved it in the subdivision. So what part of the process we go through is to accept the road and the fee to the road. So someone want to make a motion for positive 824 referral for the road acceptance of Cosgrove Court?
So moved. I like streets.
Okay. Moved by Marcy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, John. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
That was awfully quick, Marcy.
I like streets.
Okay, so that brings us now to our public hearings. That was our other business on the agenda. Thank you for attending on that. The next, so our first public hearing item is Secandino and Sons Bittersweet Partners LLC, 779 803 East Main Street, Sycamore Way, special exception for a laboratory office. My understanding is that we have opened that and it's being continued to our next meeting on March 19th because it's still in front of wetlands. Is that correct?
That's
Eric?
correct.
Okay. So if you're here on that one, again, we're not moving forward on that one tonight. We'll take that up at our next meeting, which will be where? At a different location, correct?
Really?
That will be at the community house on Church Street.
Okay, so that will be at our community house at Church Street, our March 19th meeting. So
And I'll be repeating that a couple times throughout the course of the evening, just
Maybe we repeat it on the 19th too.
Right.
In an email.
So that brings us then to item number 2, which is 27 Ferry Lane, special exception coastal site plan, dock and driveway realignment. We opened that at our last public hearing. And again, that was the issue of want to build a pathway, crisscross pathway down to the dock so the dock can be removed. I don't know if anyone had an opportunity to go look at the site. I did take a look today.
I did.
I took some pictures if everyone wants to look as well. Mr. Preddy, you ready to proceed?
Good evening, Jim Preddy, Criswell Engineering here in Brantford. You did have a chance to visit the site. I don't know if anyone else did. I think it makes more sense when you see it. But since the last meeting, and I did hand these in kind of late today. I apologize. I was quite a week. But anyhow, what we've indicated on here, just as a clarification, the property that we're concerned about is the one in red, because there are 2 pieces of property here. That beach is on this other property. Highlighted here in yellow is the dock. What what I've shown here in green is the area behind that first wall that we talked about. We're going to create a planting area for roses. There'll be a railing at the top of the wall, and behind there'll be roses. And I have a picture of this adjoining property that already has a similar situation with the railing and the roses. Also listed on the plan, we've identified invasive species that are basically all along the rocks throughout both properties, right on the plan, that are intended to be removed. And then we also have a list of other plants that we discussed, the rock slope that's here, and we're intending on planting in the spaces that are available between the rocks, kind of spot planting what we can. And it'll have to be sort of a judgment call in the field, but we've given a list of what we can possibly plant there. In addition, on the edge of the drive, there's some more or less boulders that provide protection so somebody doesn't kind of drive off the edge there. We're going to move those back slightly to the top of that rock slope, and in between the rocks and the edge of the driveway, plant a row of grapevines. We had discussed that because on this other property, the grapevines will actually come down to the other side of the driveway, so when you drive in, you kind of be driving between the grapevines is the ultimate goal here. But again, we're just really concerned with this right now, so we can get this dock construction back on track. When we have a better plan for, this side is pretty much all rock, and over here there is some soil. It's about, so when we take the invasive species out over here, there'll have to be a little bit more of a plan. We're not after that just yet, so again, we're just trying to get back to the dock. The other question I think that had come up is, what does the surface look like? When the rocks get cut and flip to the low side, there's some pictures. I think that's one. There's a picture of a rock being pinned. This is, again, what has been done on the other property. And then behind the rocks that get pinned, basically it gets grouted in where they're not on the ledge, where there's voids. So it kind of just makes it more of an even path.
Do you anticipate cementing or?
Yeah, it's a thin cement. It's, like I said, it's grout. It's not, there's not a lot of stone in it. It's, but you know, the rock's uneven, so you kind of fill in low spots and leave the rock exposed where you can. It's just the method, sort of make it more trackable.
What about a railing?
The railing on the walls will be similar to what's in that picture.
The roses, the black wrought iron. It's like a wrought iron fence. That's not
on the bigger picture.
The bigger
one, yeah.
There's a railing.
Okay.
It's a wrought iron
Okay,
fence.
so there'll be a railing similar to that.
That's what's on the adjoining properties.
You've already seen them, we're passing by.
Okay, great.
So,
Okay. And then, was there any erosion concerns or what?
Again, I think there will need to be a better plan in place when we do this side because there's soil over it. But over here, it's actually kind of amazing. There's
very
little just pockets of soil, only a couple inches deep, that shrubs have grown out of it. It doesn't even make any sense, but for the most part, it's rock.
Is it stable rock or is it loose rock?
There's some stuff that's fractured and just naturally over the years have broken off, but
I'm just
yeah.
wondering, it's a pile of rubble from years ago?
No, it has to be drilled and cut.
Okay.
Yeah, this is,
Small ledge.
right, I mean, it's going down right here.
All right, so it's in the ledge.
Right.
so the other area to the right, we're going to see in the future?
Yeah, that'll be another plan.
And that's not where the beach is? I thought that's where the beach
Yeah,
is.
that beach is
So
over here.
the owner owns the beach that,
Yes.
and he's going
Same property owner owns this and this over here.
So will the neighbor still have rights to use the beach?
I think they're deeded rights to get to the beach.
Okay.
Any other questions? Harry, do you have any comments?
I guess I'm a little unclear on how, from testimony from the last section of the public hearing, there was discussion about the amount of planting, I guess, in the area where you're intending to clean the invasive species out of, and how that will be done in a way to maintain the non-invasive species and disturb the vegetation as little as possible in the existing soil, what there is of it.
So, on the rock slope, the vegetation that's growing there is basically growing out of cracks in the rocks and things like that. And so it'll have to be removed by hand, and then wherever there's an opportunity to replant something, there's a list of plants that we're suggesting that could, again, depending on the size of the gap, what we could fit in where.
Right. I mean, just concerned that it may be so extensive that even though it's invasive, you may be removing
The rock
the
to remove
majority
root
of the
zone.
vegetation, the soil in the little interstitial spaces between the rocks, and there may be nothing really left to use to plant anything. So maybe just exposing a lot of rock.
Yeah.
Or there's, even if it's bad plants, there are plants there now. I don't.
Well, they're invasive plants.
They're invasive plants, that's right. But even if you take them all out and put good plants in, who's to say they're not going to reestablish themselves in 5 years? I don't know. It depends how the owner wants to maintain the property, I suppose, and time and investment they want to put into it.
Yeah,
But,
it's.
I'm just a little concerned about how I understand, but is it possible the beach would be disturbed, and to what degree, by removing all that? I don't know.
Again, and that's why we haven't really addressed the other site yet, because I think there's probably more of an opportunity for that on the other site. So a little more thought needs to get put involved.
So as part of this,
but-
you're going to leave those invasives in place and just
On the other
make the
property.
path clear?
Until
No,
we-
on that main
Well,
property?
until we have a plan there, yeah, we'll go as far as we can. Again, this is really just to get back on track for the dock right now, but.
That's why I was saying, you'll go to where the wall is, leave the slope with the plants, and then address that when you do the other
Right.
side. Okay.
There's very little vegetation on the site you're working on, right?
Right.
It's just all
There's
rock.
not much on this site already. And typical with any invasive, there's a couple of years of pulling that stuff out before you really get any other kind of growth or get it to go away. Got to be on it.
So what's below the area where you're going to remove the invasives on this particular property?
It's
There's a
rock
little
to
bit
the
of-
water over
It's
here.
rock to the water? with a
On
little
this
bit of
side, yeah, it's
Sand at
rock.
the bottom? Is there any marsh area or anything like that?
No.
That you can see? Nothing? Okay.
Can you get us a construction methodology on that and just
What do you mean?
demonstrate best management practices, like policing daily and like that? Because when you're breaking rock, splitting rock, I mean,
Well, they would,
our charge as a part of a CAM review is to protect the resources, and the
Right.
resources here are not as great as over by the beach, but it is, rocky shoreline. So I'd like to know that that's going to be policed daily.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so any of the rock that's cut here will be drilled and cut in small pieces at a time. Anything that falls down, they would go down by hand and pick back up. But again, because this is all rock here, there really isn't a beach to disturb over here. So if they'll put in there's areas where they could tie off with rebar, some orange fencing to kind of catch small rocks. But if anything gets by again, they could just go down and pick it up.
Could you put together a construction methodology, much like what you're telling us?
Yeah, we could do that.
Could you? And just give it to staff?
That's fine.
That would be good.
It'd be more or less like a safety.
And the other site with the invasives, that's all protecting the beach. So
Yeah.
that's coming before us under a different application?
That will need a more specific planting plan over there because there's significant more soil on that site.
Right. Right.
Any other questions? Gary, anything else?
No.
Any member of the public wish to comment? More time? Yes, sir?
I had a question.
Sure, come up and state your name for the record, please.
My name is Donald Langella, 5 Spring Cove Road. Spring Cove Road tees into Ferry Lane. I have deeded beach rights as other people in the room do. And my question is, the construction, how will it impact our ability to get to the beach in the summertime? And I don't know to ask that of, I guess, the engineer.
Okay,
Can you answer that question? Is that the only question?
sure.
Again, all the people that have beach rights, I believe, are over this piece anyway, and there is an existing path that goes down here. That won't be affected by what they're doing over here. That is what it is right now. again, we're not working there right now. When we come back in, if we're going to affect that at all, we'll have to include that in the plan.
Okay. Any other members of the public understand his answers won't affect it?
Well, the question is really more complex than that because my understanding is, and I'm sorry, I've been away for 2 months and I just drove.
You got to
I just
speak in a
drove
mic.
home today. I actually haven't been home yet. But, and this, the meeting date is a surprise to me because I haven't been here. And my curiosity is about when someone is working on the end of that street, and my understanding is the owner owns right up to the edge of that beach, including that entire beach. So he owns the entire road now, or he or she, I guess. If they shut that off to do work, how does anyone get down to the beach, is the question.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Prady, you have, there's different staging areas for parking and so forth that are not on that, don't affect the road. Is that correct?
Construction, they have access to use the other site. So that's not an issue. And the town accepted road of Ferry Lane does end here, and that pathway does start on the town part of the road, so they really can't be blocking it. So.
Okay. Thanks. Any other questions for the applicant?
No.
Any other members of the public? Yes, ma'am. Please come up if you have any further questions or comments.
Yes, hi, good evening. My name's Lori Nicholson. I live at 133 Pawson Road, and I'm an avid kayaker. And my first thought, the question I have is, the only place to tuck in before you get to Mermaid in Branford Harbor on a kayak is right next to this property, because the powerboaters come whaling in there at Johnson Point and on our side, right up to the Mermaid. And so for us, and this dozens and dozens and dozens of us out there, and now they're even renting kayaks and stand-up boards down at the landing. So I mean, on any weekend, there could be 100 kayakers, and we all go right by there because it's the safest place to get out of the boat traffic in the harbor. So my question is, how will you make it safe for us who enjoy those waters? That's my question.
Okay. Do you have any comments, Mr. Prady?
I don't really know how I could address that. I don't think that the applicant is under any responsibility to make it safe for kayakers. The deed has language in it about access to beach for bathing and boating, but it doesn't say anything about providing safe boating harbors or any of that kind of stuff.
Well, this application doesn't change the use or
Right,
potential of the dock,
We're not
right?
affecting the beach at all right there.
So nothing's going to change in the water.
Nobody had access to the dock anyway before, so.
Yeah, the public would still have the right to land at the beach, assuming they're landing within the state domain, which is below mean high water. So it's hard to know exactly where that is sometimes, but at low tide, someone could land on that beach, and that's public domain. It's not private property. So you could point out where the private property ends. Right, so there's not a lot, but at low tide, you could pull in.
Great. Yes, sir. Do you have a question or comment? Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Still a public hearing, right?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm Al Rose from 40 Valley Road in North Branford. We will be doing the work down there. So I could answer, any questions on, how we're going to do it, but so the ramp that's going to go down towards the dock, on the high side, we'll be using a hydraulic hammer, and on the low side, we'll be, putting in the boulders and different size rocks and pinning them to the existing ledge, and that'll create, cut a little here and put the rock and rubble on this side and get the ramp down there, and then it'll switch back to the dock.
Okay.
As far as the concerns on the other side and the path down to the beach, first of all, that's a different lot than we're working on, but we're not doing anything over there. Now we're not on that lot, or that's not going to change. and it's certainly not going to be blocked off. So, if you have any other questions for me on that,
Harry?
I'm wondering about hours of operation and construction for the hydraulic hammer activity.
So that, we'll certainly work within whatever the hours are. I've been down there for 4 years. I never have worked Saturdays down there, certainly not Sundays. And, so the hydraulic hammer would run from 8 to 4, but it's not a major hammer job, so I would expect it would only be 2 or 3 days.
Any other members of the public wish to comment? Any other questions? Does the applicant have anything else? Okay, nothing else from the commission? Okay, so then we can close this matter as a public hearing. Thank you. Okay, so brings us to item number 3, which is SP Development LLC, 142122 Summit Place, special exception for the IHOD multifamily residential. Applicant ready to proceed?
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, staff. My name is Attorney Nicholas Mangione from the law firm of Fasano, Ippolito, Lee & Florentine, 388 Orange Street, New Haven, Connecticut, on behalf of the applicant, SP Development. What we are here for tonight is a special exception that is a follow-up from our zone change that was granted by this commission in January of this year. Originally, this was a CP zone, which has now been converted based on that approval to an incentive housing overlay district. This is the second part of that portion of the application. This is also phase 2 of the entire application. Phase 1 was presented in an informal form back in September of 2014. Ultimately, it was approved in May of 2016. This is the second phase of that, which is going to include the third lot being 21 Summit Place. It is for a proposal of an additional 56 units. Breakdown of the unit is 12 studio apartments, 26 one-bedrooms, 18 two-bedrooms, and 12 of those units being incentive housing designated units. When looking at an incentive housing district, the purpose of such a district would be for the encouragement of workforce housing in the community. It's also to be focused on underutilized areas in the town. We went through this step obviously in phase 1 to show that this is a cul-de-sac at the end of Summit Place. From the West Main Street portion of it, all you see is commercial businesses, street front businesses, and it looks like it's a thriving area. But however, as you start driving down Summit Place until you hit the phase 1 of this development, you have a lot of abandoned lots, a lot of unused portions of the road, which basically makes this portion of the area perfect for these IHOD zones and these type of developments. Other things that you're looking for with these IHOD projects is the ties to the community, ties to amenities, ties to services. There is an existing sidewalk that goes from the Summit Place existing project all the way down to West Main Street portion. On the corner there is the bus stop already located right there with a crosswalk with the ability to get across West Main Street. Once again, making this an ideal location for such a project. Ultimately, we are going to have 2 new buildings proposed, the first being the units and the apartment building, the second one being a clubhouse amenity that's going to be available upon approval when when everything's all approved. The 3 lots will then be merged. We have provided the town with a document of merger for their review. It is the intention to merge all 3 lots to make this one project where everybody would have access to that community building. That community building's going to consist of fitness equipment, a cafe area, and multipurpose rooms. There's an outdoor patio area also tied to this community room building, and also a tot lot area. The applicant, from a legal standpoint, there's quite a criteria in which you need to bring to the town before it's even considered. We've gone through the process. From a legal standpoint, we've submitted an affordability plan that echoes the affordability plan that was previously approved by this commission going back to 2016. There are deed restrictions that it will be deed restricted for incentive housing for the incentive housing units. A marketing plan has been provided to the town, and also the merger documents, which are ready to be reviewed, and any additions that are needed from comments by town attorney. We are willing to make any changes that we need to make in order to come into conformity. Everything that we have presented, again, has been echoing what has already been approved. The affordability plan obviously was updated with regards to most up-to-date financial and income records of the town of Branford, using the median income, and that's how we've posed it. If there's any changes that need to be made to that, again, the applicant is willing to do so. The last thing that I'll say before I turn it over to the other project professionals is the reason why this was broken up into two phases. Originally, when it came to this commission, it was posed as one large project. There was a large number of, I won't say objectors, I would say people who were just unfamiliar with this type of zone and what the impact would have in the immediate neighborhood, who came out to the public hearing at that time. When they did come out, they expressed that they had concerns about the way this would run and the way that this project would be in harmony with the existing neighborhood that was there. As part of that, the project was broken into two phases, where one of them can get up and running, fully rented out, and where basically the applicant can prove themselves for the management aspect of such a project. There has not been any complaints with regards to the way that it's been run. As a matter of fact, I have letters here from numerous unit residents who are part of Phase 1, who are looking forward to Phase 2, who are complimentary of the management company and the way that the project is being run, and the aspect of the community building being added to part of this, the tot lot being added as part of this, and the ability of making this a more cohesive neighborhood. So if I could just present those. And I could turn it over for more specifics with regards to the plan to Steve Disco of Mylone and McBroom.
Good evening. For the record, I'm Steve Ditsko. I'm a professional engineer with Malone & McBroom, with offices in Cheshire and New Haven. I think Nick covered most of the information. We walked you through the general site area last month when we talked about the zone change, but this application is for the 3 parcels, 2 of which are developed. The remaining undeveloped parcel, 21 Summit Place, 3.18 acres at the end of the cul-de-sac. That property is largely overgrown. You could bravely walk through it, but it's a dense tangle of brush and overgrowth, previously developed years ago, I believe once part of the site of the former drive-in theater. The proposed development plan simply walk you through graphically what Nick described to you. There'll be 56 proposed apartment dwelling units in one building, which is located on the south side of the parcel. There'll be a clubhouse, which will be for joint use for number 14 and 22 Summit Place, are already developed, as well as the new 21 Summit Place with the 56 dwelling units. That makes for a total of 91 units. in the unified development. As we mentioned, the parcels would be merged subsequent to approval and operate as one under the single management of the company that's currently managing that. There are 84 proposed parking spaces on the 3-acre parcel. The adequate number of handicap spaces there. We have responded to the comments that we got from the town engineer and town planner relative to connectivity of the sidewalks, repair of the existing sidewalks, integration of the lights. I believe there are a few remaining remarks that the town planner had, which are certainly easy to accommodate into the construction plans, and we're willing to do that. The property will be served by public water and public sewer. Public water and public sewer coming off of Summit Place. No pumps required, a gravity connection for sewer, adequate pressure and volume for the water, both for fire and domestic purposes. The highlighted blue areas depict 2 areas of below-ground detention, taking advantage as much as we can of some infiltration to remove the peak rates of runoff and volumes. And the water will discharge in 3 directions to the drainage system to the north through the existing dwelling units to the cul-de-sac, and then to a proposed detention basin to be located on the east side of the property with a level spreader overflow to direct the runoff into a large town-owned open space parcel and a wetland area downstream of that. So I think with that, I will turn it over with the architecture to the architect.
Hello, my name is Sal Talamo. I'm from the Southern Architectural Group in Millburn, Connecticut. Just here to describe the aesthetics of the architecture of the proposed project. Here we have the front elevation of the main residential building and as well as the clubhouse.
Sure. They're not going to be able to hear them on the TV.
You can grab a mic.
Thank you. If I can just slightly go over the floor plans. Here's the ground floor where there's a total of 19,000 square feet. On the second floor, there's 19,000 as well. And on the third floor, there's approximately 17,900. There's the here's the section of the actual floors. The aesthetic of the building is meant to match the existing buildings. It's going to have clapboard siding, vinyl double-hung windows, asphalt shingle roof, and a stone veneer along the base. The main roof has gable features as well as a mansard roof, which will hide the condensers for the mechanical units within each unit. It's 3 stories, 39 feet. The height limit is 40 feet, slab on grade. And we'll end the entire project. If I can just briefly touch upon the clubhouse, it's approximately 2,500 square feet, and it will be accessible to the other 2 existing buildings as well as this proposed one. It'll have the clubhouse, fitness center, cafe, multi-purpose room, as well as the leasing office.
Is that it for you guys? Is that it for your presentation?
Yes, if you have any additional questions.
Great. Anyone have any questions at this time for the applicant?
Is this building, is this going to be a stick-built building? You're going to have metal framing? You're going to have concrete floors on second and third floor?
Concrete slab on grade.
Yes.
With a frost wall and 3 stories of wood frame.
Anything else?
I have a question for the engineer.
Sure.
For the engineer. Could you talk about a little bit more about the water quality basin? It looks like it's on the low side of, 25% slopes. You've got some high walls in there. I'm not sure how those are constructed and how you're going to access that and whether any trees are being removed or, it'd be nice to know what the impact of creating that system is on such a tough part of the site.
Yes, great question. Again, Steve Ditsko for the record. I didn't talk about the landscaping. There'll be extensive landscaping replanted on the site, much like was done for the first 2 buildings when they were redeveloped, although actually more because this is a fresh development. You can see the landscaping on the plan all around the perimeter and in the islands and down in the basin. So the basin itself, I see you're looking at the landscape plan. You'll see it has a wetland planting plan for inside the basin. It'll have a small permanent pool for water quality purposes. We do expect a little bit of infiltration, although the soils are very silty there, but you can get a little bit of water through there for the most important storms, right? The ones that happen 90% of the time or 1 inch or less, and that's what we want to design for and capture that first flush for that water quality type event. And then in addition to the basin, we have the infiltration galleries that are below the parking lot as well. And so we believe that the water quality on this site will be quite good, very much better than most because of so much infiltration area. And then the polishing basin, so to speak, would be the detention basin with the plantings in the bottom can deal with some nitrogen and phosphorus as well. In terms of the grades, it's proposed to be placed at the bottom of the slope. The slope will be cut back a little bit. That slope is a man-made slope. It's fill from years ago. We've done a number of geotechnical studies out there. It's not, harmful fill by any means. It's just unconsolidated material that was pushed from another part of the lot and not compacted. So it's actually good. We'll have to remove that and compact it back in place. The walls are proposed to be MSE walls, mechanically stabilized earth, which are basically grids and blocks, like you see often used around here.
And the fence at the top of the slope is the rail?
Yeah, it's just a split rail fence.
Round rail.
Yep.
Have you gotten your agreement with the WPCA?
So that's next. We've been through wetlands, obviously, and they scrutinize the stormwater system and the basin, and subsequent to zoning approval will be off to the WPCA.
Anything else?
I have a question.
Sure.
I'd like to ask it to the attorney. When this project is completed and the 2 different properties are unified, how many units will be up on the top there between the new building and the other 2 that are now existing?
That would be 91 total units.
Okay.
And presently, how many units are affordable right now, or the 80%?
It's running at 20% of the 35.
I believe it's 7.
Right, and those are recognized, do the state signed off on them, right? Right. Did they?
I have to go back and see. I believe we submitted them. I'll have to go back and double check to make sure that that has been completely followed up with.
Do you happen to recall, does the affordability plan say that yearly you have to certify that you're compliant with that?
There is a yearly submission that needs to be made to the zoning office for compliance purposes, yes.
Thanks. Other questions? Okay, Harry, can you go over this?
Sure. The plans you've seen are actually the result of probably 2 or 3 iterations since the submission of the application back a few months ago. There was a glitch in that because of the circulation, the properties involved with the previous phase of this need to be part of this application. So the previous application was withdrawn. This is actually a new application, so it reset the clock, and we had a chance to go through, and the applicant had a chance to address a lot of the staff comments and create a much cleaner set of plans that really, there's very few technical concerns left with them from our viewpoint. So again, this is, has all the properties as part of this application. I'm not going to go through every tiny little detail. I did prepare a set of draft findings and conditions that I'll go over when I'm done, or I can do that after the close of the public hearing. You let me know how you'd like me to proceed, but I just could highlight a few things.
Has the applicant looked at them?
Actually, I just completed them this afternoon and sent them off, so hopefully they have.
Right.
We received them at 5:45 today, but we have reviewed them. All staff professionals had the ability to look at them, and we think that we could accommodate all conditions.
Okay. And you can review it afterwards.
Okay. So there are a couple outstanding issues with respect to landscaping, lighting. I've got some remaining concerns about ensuring that during construction that the slopes are properly stabilized. If grading is finalized out of season, that there's the appropriate measures taken. A lot of these details are actually in the plans already, but I think it could use some additional caution. So similar to another application, I'm proposing a condition that we look at requiring monthly reports, should the CEO determine that to be necessary, about soil and erosion controls. Also, just some more specificity about temporary stabilization measures for the slope that's to be reworked coming down to the drainage basin. If it's out of season, you can use something like erosion control mats or other measures to make sure that we don't create some problems that have been, unfortunately, things have happened in other developments and properties recently in town. The architecture, the presentation, I am not a design professional by any means, but I will say it appears that the applicants made a significant effort to try and mitigate the long linear building and try to break it up with some relief and some architectural details that would create the appearance of something other than a long linear building that's sort of a barracks type of appearance. So I think that meets the intent of the Incentive Housing Overlay District. The commission is, by virtue of those regulations, requirement to pay closer attention to architectural details. That's part of the package of the Incentive Housing Development District requirements. So maybe something you want to look at a little more closely. Again, that's not my my expertise, so I don't want to pass any judgment there. I think it's probably best if I go through the remaining details in terms of the proposed findings and conditions, if that makes sense.
Sure,
because
if you
a lot
like
of
to,
them are.
whatever you think.
I can do that now if you like.
Sure, if you think
Okay.
it's appropriate.
Yeah. So you should have a memo dated March 5th from me in front of you. Hopefully it's got the department letterhead on it, Planning and Zoning Department. A couple of additional details I've handwritten notes into since 5:30, so I'll go over those as I get to them. The first is a finding that proposed use modified by the conditions and so forth conforms with requirements of 5.7, which is Incentive Housing Overlay District regulations, and 9.8F, which is the special exception criteria. We should probably also add in there and waives the requirement for a multifamily development report. This is a special report that the content of which is already largely addressed because of the requirements of the Incentive Housing Overlay District. So the applicants requested a waiver that they not have to compile all this information they've already presented in a special report just for the simple fact of putting it in the application file. So I think that is justified personally because you've already got all that information in the file anyway, essentially. In terms of the conditions, number one, I've just recited all the most recently submitted plan sheets. This actual proposed set of conditions closely mirrors that the commission adopted for phase 1 of the development. So 2 is just all the representations by the applicant shall be followed, hereby incorporate approval, blah, blah, blah. Number 3 would be a set of changes that would be needed to the plans that are already submitted, most recently submitted plans. In the architectural plans, you have 2 sheets labeled A-100 for each building and 2 sheets labeled A200, just to track them in our approval process and lessen confusion. They should be identified as with unique identifiers, and the applicants, I believe, are willing to do that. We would also need some additional identifying information regarding some of the existing vegetation. So we should actually add the word regarding the existing vegetation in 3B. Some of that vegetation is proposed to partially address the side and rear landscaping requirements. There are a number of significant trees on site. Many of them will have to be removed. Again, a significant tree is anything larger than 12 inches in diameter. The regulations treat those differently than other existing trees on the property. They need to be either identified as to be removed, or if they're to be preserved, there need to be special measures proposed in the plans to ensure that they will survive. Essentially requirements that it create some construction fencing around the drip line. There have been some comments in the past about whether that's sufficient or not from the town tree warden. So I'm proposing some language further on that requires that the measures already proposed in the plans might be augmented a bit as needed. We'll need the stamp and seal of landscape architect in D. Section in 6.3 that requires ground cover on the parking lot islands. Moving on to page 3, really need a snow storage area identified that doesn't conflict with landscaping. G has to do with lighting. I think the existing development a few years ago commission's been limiting what they call the correlated color temperature of the lights to a warmer color that's less impactful on the human eye per an AP American Medical Association report that you guys have looked at quite a while ago. So this is a requirement that be maintained, as well as all the different additional information that we needed for the building mounted lights. We have information on the pole mounted lights. H would require the evidence of an executed agreement with the Water Pollution Control Authority, which was mentioned, I think, by you, John. I has to do with some comments from the town engineer. So they're just listed here with respect to certain characteristics of the stormwater management system. He's also, I think the applicant actually added a couple of these already to the plan, so I've left them here because the engineer has not had a chance to review the latest set of plans. So there's a gate across the maintenance path. I think it was mentioned that in the plans there is a proposal to have I think it's just going to be earth and grass maintenance path down to the stormwater detention basin, and that was a request of the town engineer, so personnel can get down in there if needed. He's also requested the pole lights within the town right-of-way be upgraded and the style match the ones previously installed for the other phase of this development. And also looking at the standard details, make sure they actually reflect what's actually currently required by the department. I'd also suggest another condition J, which would read the temporary vegetative cover measures in sheet SED shall be modified to include additional measures as the town planner or the ZO may direct, such as erosion control mats, should conditions warrant. So that would take me down to item 4. And this is a requirement there under A that all standard soil and erosion control measures shown on the plans be in place before any construction starts on the property, and that other protection measures are required to protect the significant trees be installed. You could consider a B here, which would be the establishment of erosion and sedimentation financial guarantee per section 610E of an amount acceptable to the town engineer and a form and content satisfactory to the town planner and the town council. Item 5 is similar requirement you adopted for the application for 4 Three Elms Road, which is the monthly report, if needed, about erosion and sedimentation control measures. And again, if things are going well, the ZO can just waive this and not have an unnecessary piece of paper filed, but just want to make sure that things are being watched carefully. 6 is a typical standard condition about the ZO potentially requiring any measures to control dust created by construction on the site. 7, a standard condition about any additional signage or replacement lighting requires appropriate approval. 8 was from the last approval that any changes to the floor plans indicate alternative units with designation as the affordable units may be submitted, but they would require approval of myself or the Planning and Zoning Commission, so they could move them around in the development if needed. We have to track that though. 9 would require, before the issuance of any COs for the development, the completion of the improvements within Summit Place right away, the satisfaction of town engineer, the legal merger of all the properties as was discussed by Attorney Mangione. And the last page, requirement for the establishment of the green buffer, the adjoining residential zones, or a bond for the same if it's not seasonally appropriate to have that finished. Submission of an as-built for the construction work. Modification to the floor plans indicating which units would be restricted. I don't believe they're identified yet. F would be the submittal of final deed restrictions for each of the designated affordable housing units. Again, this is all follows what was approved for the last portion of the development. Submittal of the revisions to the affordable housing plan that may be required to ensure its conformance. It's likely already in conformance since it mirrors the last one. And then submission of any additional detail or modification of the approved plans to address how existing exterior mounted gas and electric meters would be screened. And that is it.
Good. Thank you, Harry. Questions for Harry? No, I don't think we've opened it up to the public yet. So any member of the public wish to comment? Yes, yes, sir.
For the record, Bill Horn, 246 Pleasant Point Road. I'm not submitting testimony on behalf of the Land Trust tonight, but I will say that when this was before wetlands, we raised some concerns about the impact on increasing erosion of a property that we own at the bottom of the hill behind St. Elizabeth's Church. And Vigliotti's invited me and the Land Trust Vice President Mike McGinnis to meet with their engineers, where we expressed our concerns. And as a result of that, they looked closer at what could be accomplished by infiltration, and that's where the galleries on the east side of the building and the modification of the detention basin so that there would be some infiltration there came from. The Land Trust did support the application at the Wetlands Commission level, and we're very happy with the way our concerns were addressed when we raised them at that point.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to comment? Does the applicant have any further comments? Any further questions from the commission or staff? If not, then we will close this matter as a public hearing, and this may be something we can take up. So then, that brings us to item number 4, RCR Enterprises, 5761 East Industrial Road. Special exception for warehouse wholesale business. Is the applicant ready on that one?
Good evening. Jim Preddy, Criscolo Engineering. So this project that you have to see before you here was actually approved by this commission in October of 2014. When Mr. Russo contacted me in the fall to ask about should we file an extension, we had just missed it. So because the wetland permit hangs on the expiration of the planning and zoning permit, that also expired. So we've gone back to wetlands. The only comments, and they voted to just let staff review it and make sure there weren't any changes and approve it. These are the exact plans that were from the approval. The only two comments from wetlands was that we had an agreement through Bittersweet Partners to connect the outlet from the drainage basin into their property. There's an existing drainage pipe that goes to a stone channel here. That letter was also dated from 2014. She wanted an updated letter, and I called the owners, and they said that wouldn't be a problem, so we will be getting a letter saying, the current letter saying the same thing, that they have no problem. And the other thing was that she wanted it noted that the lower detention basin will be used as a sediment trap during construction because at the bottom of the hill is wetland area on the other property. But essentially it was for the two buildings shown in orange here. The one shown in yellow is already there, existing. There would be a requirement to combine the property at that point because there would be some shared parking going on. The limits of the pavement on this site are already there. There would be some restriping really on this side, and then this other pavement work. But again, these are exactly the same plans that have been approved in 2014.
Thank you. Gary, comments?
Yes, these are exactly the same plans. There were a few conditions on the approval then. I've essentially bulked them up a little to reflect kind of the current practice of the commission in dealing with developments such as this in terms of lighting, landscaping, significant trees. There was a condition on the old approval for the legal merger of the two properties, which I understand has not taken place yet, and I assume it will once this goes ahead. Evidence of an executed agreement with the Board of Pollution Control Authority.
That's actually happened.
That's already happened? Okay.
So well, they've approved the connection. I don't know that the agreement's been signed, but they've approved the connection.
So whenever that's ready, that would need to be in place before there was a zoning permit, building permit issued. Again, some standard conditions, no additional signage, new lighting without approval. Actually, that is repeated. Why, I don't know, twice. We want to get rid of condition 6. Typical condition on any, if necessary, determined to be necessary by the zoning enforcement officer, additional measures to control dust. And then standard conditions, last one now 7. Ensure continued compliance with zoning regulations. All landscaping must be maintained as an ongoing requirement of the approval. So it's basically a redo of the last time around, a little more verbiage.
Thank you.
Any concerns that you have? Okay.
No, the only thing I would suggest that now, just because of where we are in the world, when we resubmit the lighting cuts, they'll probably be LEDs now instead of.
Right, I did accommodate that.
I think it specifically said high pressure sodium, didn't the approval?
Yes, that's all been reworked, so the new lighting condition would basically provide for a whole new lighting plan once you're ready to submit that. It would comply with the new regulations and 3,000 degrees Kelvin and the rest of it. So assuming that you would do that when you get to that point. Yeah.
Any questions for the applicant or staff by commission members? Not. Any member of the public wish to comment? Seeing none. Any further comments by the applicant or staff or commission members? None. Then we'll close this matter as a public hearing. So that completes our public hearings. Oops, excuse me. It completes the public hearings on the first page.
Correct.
Now let's go to the public hearings on the second page. So David Rim, 113 Sunset Beach Road, special exception for accessory structure. Are we ready to proceed on that?
I believe the person is represented by the same person representing the last application, so
I see.
Switch over.
Needs to get words.
Do we have a staff report on this?
We have a staff report I'm going to pass out, and it is from our planning consultant, which you already have a copy of, right?
You just gave it to me.
I did.
Actually, I did get it in the email before I got
I sent
it.
you this one. This is a newer one.
Oh, yeah, but you just handed this one to me. Too.
Yeah, but you got that.
Yes, I did. Yes.
Pieces of paper going around. I believe they are both double-sided. One is all black and white, and it says staff report at the top, and it is by our consulting planner, John Guskowski. And then I have prepared a memo dated today with a staff recommendation with some proposed findings and conditions, should the commission desire to go forward with this, and I can explain all that after the presentation.
Let's, you can proceed.
Okay, property 113 Sunset Beach Road. This house was basically torn down and rebuilt in 2015, I believe. There was an existing garage here in yellow that was left. They would like to take that down and build a new garage with an accessory apartment, basically a guest room with a little kitchenette, and above the garage in this area. It would conform to all the setbacks, the new building, but the existing one does not. I mean, it's less than half a foot off the property line in the back right now. But the new structure would conform to all the zoning setback regulations. We don't exceed any issues with coverage or floor area, but because the building is slightly larger than 750 square feet total floor area, and it's a little bit higher than 15 feet, we're here for a special exception for that. And accessory apartment by itself also requires a special exception. The report, I did get the staff report from the consultant. A couple of items under number 1, existing and proposed 2-foot contour elevations. When we did this plan originally, LWF had done the survey and we just did the CAM application. There was only spot grades here, there weren't any contour information, but I will tell you, because I have it, I think I have it in the folder, there's only about a foot of grade change across this, so there'd only be a little bit of one contour showing anyway. Let's answer that. The existing proposed percentage of impervious cover on the zoning chart, we can add that to the final drawings if you'd like. Typically, we don't want to ask for that for residential property. However, I did calculate it, even removing the area past the seawall as critical coastal resource area. What's existing there now is 37.9%, and we're only making it 38.3, so we're only raising it 0.4%. So I don't think we're anywhere near the 50% that they were concerned about. Parking requirements, they do have a garage, and there are parking spaces already for 3 cars in front of the house now. The sewer, water utilities are all within the right-of-way here, that these other properties, in fact, share. I don't know exactly the details of it, but they would work that out with the utility companies where the connections actually are. And the other thing was limits of vegetation. We don't intend then that there would need to be any tree removal for the construction of the garage. I actually clipped a picture of the Google Earth, and you can see how we're kind of moving this slightly this way. And if you look at the Google Earth picture, that area is already cleared. It's up in here. So
what's this?
It's another property out over there.
Is that a ditch or is it a driveway?
Not really sure. So I think that more or less addressed their concerns, and then I did get various conditions and findings, and I think they're all acceptable. It's pretty minor, so not a very big project. Again, we're only changing what's there by 0.4% over the whole site, so.
Thanks. Harry, comments?
I think the only thing not mentioned was the comment about the driveway, but I talked with the town engineer, and he is very clear that that is a private right-of-way across the property. So the comment about the driveway apron really doesn't apply here. This is also just, I believe was covered, an accessory apartment being proposed in an oversized accessory structure. That's why it's before you for 2 special exceptions and a CAM. We did refer it to DEP. I'm not sure the timing of that. We may have been a little slow on that, given staffing. They have not been able to get back to us. I'm not overly concerned about that, since the construction of the house was found, potentially close to the shore, was found several years ago to not pose any significant impact to coastal resources. But that is out there. We just don't have any comments yet from them. There are some potential concerns, and it's really not per se subject of zoning. I just want to mention them since we're, at this point in the process, that the building as is designed may not meet the flood management ordinance because of understanding from the town engineer that you now need to meet VE requirements in this area, even though you're outside of the VE zone in terms of where the structure is proposed. So there may need to be breakaway panels and so forth in the bottom ground floor of the building, which could probably potentially be redesigned to accommodate that. However, the plans don't show that now.
Right. I did also have a conversation with town engineer today, and he also didn't think it was a zoning issue. He said, but before you come in for a building permit, make sure that that stuff's addressed.
So typically, since we have those plans in the application, I would suggest, I would pose a condition that accommodates their modification to address how they may need to be changed to address the VE requirements.
I've already spoken to the architect and warned him it was coming too.
Perfect, okay. And the only other things, the typical 3 conditions on, one on sedimentation erosion controls be installed before the start of construction. Any additional signage or lighting obtain the proper approval. And if there's any issue with dust generated by fill or movement of earth material on the site, that measures be taken to control that if directed by the zoning enforcement officer. And just put in a condition, just a statement to be clear that the approval is not intended in any way to imply that the submitted architectural plans conform to the requirements of the Town of Brantford Flood Management Ordinance. Of course, they would need to comply with all the other, sections of the zoning regulations that follow up with a accessory apartment approval, so that there's a deed restriction in place, and that's submitted for review by town council, and that approval's in place before the zoning permit's issued.
Agreed. This is almost identical to the one we did on Thimble Island Road last year, I think.
Yep.
Thanks. Any questions for applicant or staff?
The coastal resources are Sandy Beach. I mean, there's a bulkhead on the property?
There's a little sandy beach here, and the rest of this is, I think, rocky over here.
How many feet is the proposed structure from?
From the closest point on this other property, we're 105 feet away from the new structure.
So what's going on the property behind the garage where the dirt road is? Or the
I'm
driveway?
not really sure. It's a bigger property, it looks like, on the GIS. Doesn't look like there's a lot going on over there, though. Maybe one house.
Yeah. In terms of construction, this is on slab, and there's a minimal disturbance to the existing terrain. It's just going to right on top of the ground that's there.
I'm just concerned that you're moving the house. It's a pre-existing non-conforming use against it. So there's...
Well, they're taking the existing structure down, which is...
Hear me out.
Okay.
It's a pre-existing non-conforming use that's the neighborhood's used to having it on the property line. There's no use behind it. By moving it closer to the road, you're actually crowding access for emergency vehicles to the next property. I mean, you're making it tighter. I'm just questioning why you wouldn't petition to formalize, maybe something a little bit further off, like a sort of a middle ground, and instead of completely complying and
take
setback.
it down and put it back. we'd have to get variances for
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah.
And
Right.
That was
the first
discussed.
thing ZBA is gonna ask is, can you fit it on the property? And
You
yes,
can.
we can.
Yeah.
So,
But I'm looking at it from the safety of the roadway, I think, and it just looks a little crowded to me, that's all.
I just
That's
think they
just
didn't
my
want to
concern.
go through the potential process of
I
getting
understand.
denied.
so
So.
I don't think it's approvable at ZBA,
Right.
because you could fit it.
Fair enough.
Any other questions? Let's open up the public. Any member of the public wish to comment?
Good evening. For the record, my name is Timothy Lee. I represent Matt Frechette, who is the owner of the property at 117 and 121 Sunset Beach Road. I'm here tonight in a rather unique situation. In all the years I've been before planning and zoning commissions and land use commissions, I don't think a neighbor has ever hired me to come to a meeting to speak in favor of an application, but that's what I'm here to do tonight. The RIMS were kind enough to share the copies of the application with Mr. Frechette. They reviewed the plans, they reviewed the structure that's going to be there. Matt is very appreciative of that gesture that they made to him. He likes the house or the building the way it's designed. I do understand from the conversation tonight that it may be modified to comply with the building code because it's in the flood district. What Matt particularly liked about the house was the second floor windows on the right-hand side, which would face his property, were minimal. So if the property does get redesigned to accommodate the floodplain, we would ask that they retain the window sequence on the second floor in order to preserve Matt's privacy.
Where are they relative to this? Can you put on the map?
On the right side of the garage.
They're down there, okay.
Other than that, the only other question he had was addressed by Harry. He just wanted to make sure that no fill was being brought in to raise the structure higher, the ground level of the structure. I understand that it's going to be slab on grade with the existing grade, and it should not pose any concerns with storm drainage going on to the Frechette property. So based on all that, we're happy to report that we are in favor of this, and we're going to ask the board to approve it on behalf of the RIMS tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Any other comments, questions, or comments from the public? Seeing none, does the applicant have any additional comments?
Nothing else additional.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant or by the commissioner staff? If not, then we can close this matter as a public hearing. Do we want to take a break at all? Or? Yes? Okay. We'll take a 5-10 minute break.
Thank you.
Like
For a couple months,
houses
I've been
and
here
that
since July, August.
garages and houses have to come through here.
I think we're live.
Okay. Okay, we'll call our meeting back to order. And so let's talk about some of the public hearing items before we get to the old business and minutes. We did take care of the 824s. Item number 2, the public hearing was the 27 Ferry Lane. That's the coastal site plan special exception for grading application, the stone business. We don't have a resolution prepared for that. I think there are. I don't know what your thoughts are, and I guess again 5 regular members. It looked approvable. I think what were the issues there? There's some planting details, and I know Harry, you had some questions, some thoughts about the.
Yeah. I liked how John phrased
the construction methodology, just so that we know exactly how it's going to be done, and we can kind of watch it and.
So I can propose a condition that they submit the construction methodology plan, and again.
Right. I think you mentioned hours of operation, probably not on
I was concerned about even though it's only a few days, if they started, I think it was 7 a.m.
8, maybe we asked them to do 9.
No, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, a little bit later in the summer, try to, avoid maybe July and August, or I don't know. can be limited, even if it's a few days, it can be really disruptive to people.
I think they said last public hearing, he said that he was, want to get this done
Before.
sooner than later, way
Yeah.
before the summer.
Yeah, so I think that would be best.
Well, it's not going to take long to do,
No,
based on
sure.
what needs to be done.
Yeah.
Okay. So is the thought that you prepare a resolution?
I think I just
or-
prepare a set of findings and conditions, so if
Okay.
that's acceptable.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, if we need to, I mean,
Bring that to the meeting on the
we
19th.
could vote tonight. I mean,
can we
There's
formulate the
any
conditions tonight, or do you?
I prefer to bring it to you already, I think, just to make
Okay.
sure I have the wording.
That's, okay. I think
I
if
mean, I
we-
could probably do it, but I just
Right.
got a lot going on.
Yeah, no, there's no, I mean, there was some neighbor concern, whatever, let's make sure we get it right. So,
There was.
yeah, so, okay, so, but we gave him directions on that, but.
I mean, I can find out if it's an issue for the applicant if you'd like me to, without, I think I could just go down, I think he's still in the room. If that's, if you want me to find out.
Find out what, if he needs to.
If there's a burning desire to have approval tonight versus 2 weeks from now.
Oh, yeah, it would. It seemed like time was of the essence.
Sure.
Just
While Harry's gone. What can we do here? We can, well, the next item was the IHOD.
Summer Place.
Summer Place.
yeah.
And I think that's, there was no opposition.
No.
We have a draft resolution. There were some tweaks that Harry went through. The applicant heard what the conditions were and had no problem with them. So I think that's simply a matter of making sure we have all the typos and things fixed up on that one.
I'm actually very familiar with the development, and the last development was done very well and managed, and I mean, it's a really good project. My only concern was understanding the water quality basin, and when I heard it was, you know, how that hillside was created, I think it's actually going to be an improvement for them to go in and compact and you know, secure it a bit more, so
No.
I'm in favor of it.
And absolutely, Marty, that's great. Anytime there's hills and erosion, whatever, those are obviously good questions. So Harry, going backwards now to, what would you find out?
waiting to the 19th for a formal written thing is fine.
Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so now we're talking about item number 3, the IHOD one, and and while you're away.
We're on vacation.
Did you hear us?
You already decided?
Yeah, we spoke, everyone seemed positive about it. The applicant seemed very responsive to the land trust, drainage concerns. We got letters in favor from residents, and so I think we're okay. And Harry, you already went through the
I did,
many pages of conditions. I know there were tweaks along the way. I made some notes, but maybe you can just highlight the changes.
I guess a couple of things I did suggest, which apparently there's no concern about, is just possibly including some additional measures in the temporary vegetative control part of the sedimentation and erosion control plan, which sound acceptable to the applicant, so we can look at what might be needed in addition to what they already have. Let's see. The other item I mentioned that wasn't on the written document was establishing basically a bond for the erosion sedimentation control, if you want to do that or not.
Do you have a recommendation?
Well, it is more process, it's more stuff, and I think with the reports, perhaps we don't need it. I think with the watchful eyes of the land trust and some of the neighbors around there, and the changes in the design that have already been made, hopefully there's this is not going to be a significant problem. The process of going through and actually having the bond, and if you, in the end, you need to do something, is a tremendously involved process. So I would say no. I don't think it's going to benefit us a lot.
We don't need to add that then? Everyone okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and then I had on the finding, you added waiving something as well, correct?
It was a multifamily development report that's an item on the site plan checklist as a requirement, but again, most of the information on that is already in the application because of the requirements of the incentive housing overlay district.
Okay.
In terms of information, so it's really not needed.
Okay, so then I think we'd be looking for a motion to approve the application with the findings and conditions in the staff report. Again, with the additions by Harry, there was the finding of the waiver in item number 1 about the multifamily development report, and then the addition, the temporary erosion control measures mentioned as item number
3J.
3J.
So moved as presented.
Okay. Motion made by Marcy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Joe. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that's done. Okay, so that brings us to RCR Enterprises, 5761 East Industrial Road, and I believe in the staff report you mailed to us, you had the suggested conditions. Again, this is simply repeating something we've already approved, and I believe I think you tweaked the lighting, I think, or that was the one?
Yeah, the lighting condition would accommodate, they are redoing the lighting plan to use LEDs instead of high-pressure sodium. The only change I proposed was somehow I repeated the wording of the condition twice, so if you could, condition 6 is not needed because it's the same as condition 5. You could just read number 7 as 6 and 8 as 7.
Okay. Does that sound okay with everyone? Okay, then, if someone want to make a motion to approve the application in accordance with the staff comments, the conditions set forth in the staff report of March 5th, 2020, with the additions Harry just mentioned, which is deleting number 6 and renumbering 7 and 8 to 6 and 7.
So moved.
Moved by Joe. Is there a second?
So second?
Second by John. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Took care of that one. Now we have 113 Sunset Beach Road. And again, Harry has prepared a finding and condition, and it's nice to have the neighbor show up and then speak in favor, right? So I think, Harry, you suggested something about condition about flood management, an additional one?
I think it's already in here. So you've got condition 1, which basically statement you're not approving the submitted architectural plans if they contradict the requirements of the flood management ordinance. On condition 2, basically saying all the work is going to conform to the plans that have been submitted, except as it might be further modified. For construction-related minor changes, including revisions, architectural plans that conform to the floodplain management section of the town ordinances. So we'll cover that, and then 3, 4, and 5 are standard conditions.
Okay. Is that, any questions? Look good? If that looks good, then if someone want to make a motion to approve the application with the findings and the conditions set forth in the Harry's March 5th memo.
So moved.
Moved by John. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Joe. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, so that brings us then to our minutes. Minutes from our February 20th meeting. And I don't know if you've had a chance to take a look, and if someone would like to make an appropriate motion. They were sent out, all 13 pages of them. All right. Someone will make a motion? Joe makes a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Marcy. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that brings us down to old business. And our first item of old business is Kevin Curry. And
For
again,
correspondence.
Correspondence, sorry. What's going on?
Just have a couple things to pass out. We did receive a letter from Mr. Custerer, which frankly I have not read in its entirety. So I will leave that to you, and perhaps there's an issue in there that can be taken up outside of a new application. I can discuss that with Mr. Custer and schedule a time.
And what application did this concern, Harry?
This was concerning an application at 3 Elms Road. So if you recall, he requested approval for an oversized accessory structure, a large barn in the back, potentially to store some of the boats that have been on the property and do some other things that he would like to do in the building. There were some requirements for limiting where the boats could be stored. I think a couple of landscaping requirements. I'm frankly going through the whole thing and I don't have all his concerns in my head, but one of the questions was, I think he wanted to establish a third curb cut on 3 Elms Road. And there's a section of the zoning regulations that says you can have so many curb cuts per X feet of road frontage. And he wants to basically use all of his road frontage on Thimble Islands Road and 3 Elms Road and have all 3 curb cuts entitled to on 3 Elms Road. It's debatable potentially whether the language says, you know, the frontage at Thimble Islands Road entitles you to X number of curb cuts at Thimble Islands Road if you're a corner lot, and then the road frontage on 3 Elms Road entitles you to whatever you're entitled to on 3 Elms Road. So that's an interpretation question you folks would need to decide.
But the bottom line is he wants us to change something, in which case you've directed him to make a request to modify the application.
Right, and I've told him that, and he has not chosen to do that yet.
Okay.
So I'll pass this out.
Okay, any other correspondence?
I'm not sure whether I passed this out, so I'm going to give it to you again. It's a communication from Jim Perito of Halloran and Sage with respect to the Branford Self-Storage Facility, and again, a question of interpretation. I believe he is hoping to attend your next meeting to present that interpretation question to you, but I can pass out his writing so you have that to look at.
Okay.
Between now and then.
Thanks. So this is something he'll probably attend the next meeting. We can review, so we can review that before our next meeting. Any other correspondence?
That is it.
Okay, great.
Oh.
What?
No, I covered this last meeting. I'm sorry. All set.
Okay, it brings us item number 1 of old business, which is 165, 195 Main Street, Kevin Curry. We had some discussions during our deliberations. Again, I think the general focus was this was the convenience store next to Shelley's. Again, there are 4 uses on the property. There's a garage, convenience store, liquor store, and an office. I think there were 16 parking spaces, where 34 required, and the question was, are we willing to waive that? That was the main issue. There were other problems, but they probably could be addressed by conditions. There were problems with lighting. There were other details, but those are the main issues. We had some discussion last time, and I think Fred was sitting on this. Fred is sitting, Joe is out, I think, John, you're probably out. So it looks like the people voting on this are Joe, Fred, myself, Marcy.
Listen to the tape.
And did you listen to the tape? Did I miss anyone? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. It's John. John isn't.
John, Joe,
Fred,
Fred, you,
right.
and Marcy.
Okay. So, and I know, John, you were inclined to, because you thought parking was an issue, and I think Fred, you're concerned about it. Joe, you were thinking that wasn't a deal breaker. So, Marcy, what
I missed all of it. But what was the issue?
What was the issue?
That they were. I just missed what you said when you're saying what their positions were.
Oh, their positions were that, well, I don't want to paraphrase, but John and Fred were inclined to deny the application because they think it's too much for the site. It's too much. There's not enough parking on the site to accommodate all the uses. That was that. And the waiver, there's a provision for waivers, but it was pretty unspecified. So that was that, and then Joe was in the position that, hey, we can work with it. You know, that's my, you guys can talk, but whatever.
right.
Yeah.
So I haven't put any 2 cents in it, so
You haven't put your 2 cents in yet, so.
So I'll reflect. I'm still a little bit on the fence either way, but, you know, I feel like it was a site that was there, has been functioning. You know, I've thought very carefully about whether bringing in a retail use was going to increase traffic, and if so, what kind, how often, how much. I'm inclined to think that while there may be some increased traffic, that it's not going to, you know, it's not going to be overwhelming or that much different than what's happening now. And
That's not true, though.
it's hard for me to quantify how much. That's what I'm struggling with, is how to quantify.
Because the gas station's being improved, and it's now going to be
a more usable gas station. Right.
So I think it's just too much. That's too much for that particular site, and I think it's too much to impose on that adjacent residential neighborhood.
I haven't fully made up my mind.
We already have the similar problem across the street, you know, and it's just compounding it.
Well, they can't quantify how much more traffic, so that was troubling to me. You know, and just trying to think logically about it, I'm thinking if they're putting, you know, increasing the retail in one area and reducing the maintenance, they're two different uses. It's hard for me to really logically.
I think the mechanical work is going to stay pretty much the same.
Even though they're reducing the bay?
Yeah, because they've only got a certain number of people. It's a shop like I've run in my life. So, you know, I kind of know you make it work. So I don't see a reduction in that. I do see a reduction in the gas traffic. And I think that
You see a reduction
the
in the
convenience
gas
store
traffic.
just puts it over the top.
Wait, you see a reduction in the gas traffic? Or
No, I see an increase in the gas
Okay.
traffic.
Do you see any reduction in the repair traffic?
I really don't.
But Marcy, on the flip side, I'm not seeing any increased production on the repair side. One of the requests are to reduce the amount of parking. And as I drove around this last week or so, just looking at garages, what I see is that, you know, because you have one mechanic or two mechanics, doesn't mean you have just one car or two cars.
No, I understand that.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah,
they
talk
have
about that.
6 cars because while they're working on one, they're ordering parts for another. So reducing the amount of parking, that's my concern. Reducing it to that level, I don't think it's just going to create what we already have on the other corner with Shelley's. There's not enough parking. There's too much business. And I think what you do is you're going to recreate the same thing at a great disadvantage to the neighborhood.
Like I said, I'm still, I'm perplexed about where I stand on it, to be honest. I'm wavering both ways because I don't want to deny somebody who has an existing business the ability to conduct their business, although I don't know if it's our authority to say how much you can prevent your business from growing or in the manner, I don't know that I have the authority to say, you can't grow it in line with the times. I mean, I think Joe wants to say something. Help me out here.
I'll throw you a lifeline here.
Yeah.
Again, it's my initial contention is that it's an enforcement problem on Shelley's side. I mean, because they are creating a problem just because that's the way business works. That should not be limiting someone else's opportunity to do something that is reasonable. One of the things I find distressing is that in every case where we've had something that's been contentious like this, we have had a motivated applicant who was able to or willing to make some peace among the neighbors and work out a local resolution and come before us with a proposed resolution. We haven't seen that yet. And it just sort of bothers me because I know at some point somebody's going to be saying, oh, those knuckleheads up in planning and zoning are keeping us from doing what we need to do. So whether we are the knuckleheads in planning and zoning who are unfairly giving a business an opportunity or unfairly diminishing the quality of a neighborhood, there is still an opportunity that is being missed here for a resolution among the parties who are all critically affected by this. And, you know, we're sort of on the hot seat to be arbiters of this resolution. And I still am not going to change my belief in this. But the fact that you have people who are neighbors who can't work this out amongst themselves, because I'm sure a conversation with Shelley's among business owners and inviting some neighbors into that conversation would be to everyone's ultimate benefit. Again, my initial response was, you know, this is really an enforcement problem, but if you're going to be neighborly, you don't need to have somebody come in enforcing stuff if everybody wants to live together and be neighbors. So that's you know, that bit of pontification on my part isn't going to resolve anything, but I think it accurately sums up my bother with having to make this, make an action on this.
That's why
Yeah,
I've been trying to be quiet.
I mean, I see the enforcement issue with Shelley's. I understand that, but I still see the physical reality of two things being in the same place at the same time.
I have the concerns also that the parking may get worse because there's an office quote use that is not used.
Yeah.
That's not even taking up any parking. So any day, they could tomorrow, without coming before us, you know, get something in there. That's going to take up more of the parking. And then you add this new use, which I think is going to have more people pulling in and out. It just will, because
it will.
That's what it is. So that's a concern. I also have some concern that it's, you know, again, we're in the Village District area. I mean, we have more discretion in this area. It's the downtown. If this were frankly on Route 1, I wouldn't care. But it's more, you know.
You wouldn't care which way though.
I wouldn't.
You'd be okay with it, or
I
you'd
would be more inclined to go with. I'm not going to second guess the business owner. They're the ones that are on the line or whatever. But I think when you get into the town district, part of what you're doing, and this benefits both ways, that we have the right to look more closely and to look at that. And part of it is it's the third 1.5. Yeah. It's
just I know there's too many uses there.
Yeah,
I just don't know.
It's a use. It's going to open at 5 in the morning. That's what he said his hours were, and you know, with lights, you know, it's.
And it's not open now at 5 in the morning with lights.
No, it's a gas station, service station.
People still need gas at 5:30 in the morning. They just don't necessarily get their coffee if they go there.
No.
Which is why this would increase traffic.
It's a service station. No. If it were the use now, they could.
But if they add the new use, they might get more traffic, or we anticipate that they'll get more traffic because if they go at 5:30 in the morning, they'll get their coffee, so they'll fill up and get their coffee, and which might attract more people to the station.
Well, yeah, if it will happen. Yeah, the new use will have more traffic, and it'll be earlier traffic, and there'll be lights on and so forth. So I don't know, but you know, part of me is still who am I to, you know, whatever, you know.
To your point about the Village District, we have to remember that across the street is Rickland.
Yep.
A place I love, and I hope it's there forever.
Right. I did too.
But as a planner,
someday it'll go.
It's going to go into something, and that's going to generate some traffic. And it's just, you know,
Chuck, you know, for me, the fly in the ointment is that there's a person who runs the garage, and it's his livelihood.
Yeah.
And I'm sensitive to that.
Yeah.
And this would be a much easier decision to make if he was not right. They're gonna close the garage down and say, we have an empty building.
Yeah, I know.
We wanna convert it to a convenience store. I wouldn't have a problem with that. That's not my concern, because then I think the space is really being dedicated to one thing, but it seems that the tough part of this is that you have a person trying to make a living. I'm good with that. I would love to see where the owner of the property said, listen, the tenant said he just wants a few more years. I don't know, a few more years is defined as, but if the owner of the building said, look, I'm gonna give you the next 3 years to finish up your career, he said he'd been there like 40 years or whatever, then I could see that. Then they wait, and then it becomes a convenience store. I don't have a problem with that.
Right.
But being contingent on a man potentially losing his career just for a couple of years, but I still think that in the big picture, it's not a good precedent to set. The way it's being proposed.
No, Fred, I'm with you. I think that would be the ideal thing. Hey, let's just keep status quo for a while,
Yeah.
and then come in. I know, but we can't.
I know, we can't do that, no.
Yeah, we don't do that.
If we were to deny it, can we deny without prejudice to give them an opportunity to come back if they can come to a resolution with the neighbors?
I wouldn't, I'd say we deny it because of parking. I don't know. I mean, we could. What I don't want to do is deny it. We can deny it for the lighting. Yeah. But because they haven't complied with. There's lots of things in there that doesn't right, and that's part of the frustration. And then, frankly, Joe, I think you kind of hinted on it that why hasn't this guy approached the neighbor? Why hasn't he fixed the parking right? Why isn't whatever? But I think those can be addressed with conditions.
Why isn't he here?
Yeah. But but by saying without prejudice, that suggests that we would approve it if they did something. And what is it that maybe
Well,
they
that's
would.
what I'm trying to figure out. Is there a way to make it provable?
They could do more with the off-site parking.
Yeah,
That's
you've got a whole set of standards in this request. So it's a special exception process to request the modification of the parking requirements. And there's factors that says the commission should consider in addition to the general special exception standards. And we discussed some of these things: reduction of peak parking demand, improvement of circulation. Some of these things might be impossible in this particular site, but enhancement of neighborhood aesthetic quality, provision for vehicular access, provision for pedestrian access, carpool incentives, provision for off-site employee parking. I know they tried to do that, but they didn't really present anything concrete. They just presented, a gray, vague,
verbal agreement.
You can park in our parking lot as long as it's not a problem. But I don't know, maybe that could be solidified a little more if they had some more time, or look at other alternatives. So I guess those things are possible in terms of them coming back.
Until you have a slip and fall on the Richmond lot and everyone gets sued.
Well, there you go.
From the insurance guy.
I understand Richland's position.
Yeah, it's a real concern, absolutely.
Okay, so we gotta decide.
So, I think we need to put it back on them. In my opinion, would be that we should deny it, maybe without prejudice, so that they could try and work something out and come back to us with a modification of what we're looking at now.
Okay, if they want to, you're right, yeah.
I mean, you could say you're denying it due to failure to provide sufficient, to sufficiently address the criteria for the commission to grant a modification of the parking requirements. So I could give them an opportunity to create a more sufficient case they could bring back to you, possibly. Does that make sense?
No, I think we have all the facts on the table in front of us. We're just kicking the can down the road.
That's possible. Maybe, what else could they do? I don't know. I mean, they could get a formal agreement, but could they really do that with any adjoining property owners? I don't know.
Well, if we deny it, the property basically stays used as it is, right?
Unless they,
until there's some significant change to the configuration of the buildings and the
well,
arrangement
he
on the
could
site.
kick the guy out. and-
That's what he said he might do, is just
Kick the guy out and just come in with a, just a
straight convenience store.
Straight convenience
Right.
store.
Yeah.
Well, I think what you do in the resolution is if you're going for denial, you deny it for everything. And then anyone can always resubmit.
Yeah, that's
Right,
true.
I agree with that.
And, you know, you can listen to this conversation and see where we're coming from. And see where people are coming from. And maybe they come up with something. Maybe they talk with neighbors. Maybe they get something formal. Or maybe they wait. I don't know. But that's a denial. Is that kind of,
Sounds where, that's like where everyone's leaning. Well,
That's-
most people are leaning.
Yeah.
I'm swaying, swaying to your side of the fence, I guess. I don't know about how Joe feels, but is he holding out for the vote?
well, then I think we should probably have should we have a resolution?
Well, it'd be helpful if you gave me a direction. I'd hate to prepare two of them.
Yeah, no,
I was trying to get them there, Harry.
I get it. I mean, I'm trying to read the tea
someone-
leaves
someone
too.
make a
But
motion to deny tonight, but I mean, that's, but I don't.
you
I
could take
wanna-
a straw poll to give me a sense so I can prepare a resolution to deny or approve.
Yeah, so I think it's,
I think we have to deny it based on the parking.
So, one.
John's a deny.
John's a deny, Fred's a deny. What are you?
What's Joe? I don't
I'm
think
not
it matters.
denying.
I think it's 3-2, which regardless of which way I vote, even if we put, I mean, are you still on the fence as well?
I'm leaning towards a denial, but I'm still,
I just have a hard time denying a person a right to develop their property.
I know.
And
I'm with you.
that's,
It's a-
that's what I'm, I'm struggling with. I mean, I don't think, like Joe, like
Yeah,
Joe said,
I mean-
that the traffic is solely their, creation. A lot of it is coming from Shelley's. Are the lights a concern when they improve the lighting? That's gonna be a change, it's just,
yeah, no, I know. Yep, I understand.
Chuck, it's like, we're being asked to be more creative than the applicant on how to make this work. Right? And I agree with Joe in that respect, the applicant has just got to step to the plate and do some of this work. We're here, soul searching about what's the way. We have in front of us an application that could be approved or not approved. I think we should just bring it to a vote.
Okay. Okay, so, and it sounds like, I don't think we're ready to cite the specific regs that are the basis for a denial tonight. So I think we need a resolution. And I think you looked through the staff report, and I think you mentioned,
Well, the biggest thing is that section 65I, which is the request they made for a modification of the parking requirements. So it sounds like the consensus may be the commission is not in favor of granting that modification. Therefore, they don't meet the parking requirements. Therefore, that's the basis, really, of the denial. I mean,
that's the main one.
I think the other things like the lighting and some of the other concerns could probably address with, but that's the main thing.
Well, do we want to make a motion tonight? and say-
Yeah, you could certainly, I think you could do it.
Okay,
You could say,
so give us the regs.
you would be saying, I think, that you find that the criteria in section 65I for the requested modification to parking requirements are insufficiently addressed. Period, almost. I mean, you could go through some of the special exception criteria and talk about the potential impact on the neighborhood, if you like. I mean, it's really that straightforward. And I've got a couple extra, well, actually I don't. Thought I made copies of this, but And this is not, it's not the lighting one. There's a one that went, goes back to February 6th.
Were there two, was it a separate special exception for the modification of the lighting?
It is. It's under section 65I. I mean, for the modification to the parking requirements.
Okay, so it's two, or is it two denials or one denial?
It's one denial.
It's one denial, okay.
Well, I think that's what you would deny.
Okay, it's one app, I didn't know if it's a separate special exception application to modify the parking. So
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So there's two applications?
Yes. Well, there's two special exceptions. One application, but two requests for two special exceptions, one for the use.
Okay, so we deny, one would be deny the request to modify the parking because they failed to satisfy the criteria.
And then you're denying the other application because there's insufficient parking.
Right. And also, I would add lighting non-compliance, 6.7.
Okay. Maybe it's best I just write this up and bring it back to you
Well,
then.
I mean, can you approve the right to have a retail use and deny the parking because it doesn't
No,
pull
because there's
together?
parking requirements
Because-
go along with it that aren't being addressed if you don't give them the
Well,
modification.
If they can satisfy the parking requirements, you would approve the retail use, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, but the use itself creates additional parking requirements, so that's what's driving the whole thing.
If you can satisfy the parking requirements, you would approve the use.
Yeah, but that's up to you folks. If you want to grant the modification, then they satisfy them. But if
Well,
you
they
don't
haven't
grant it,
satisfied them, which is the basis for the denial for the parking.
well, you're
But
not granting the modification if you don't grant it. If you do grant it, then they do satisfy
I'm just
them.
saying, is there, you know, if
I
you
don't
don't have
get
an issue with retail going in there, I mean, in and of itself, if all the parking requirements work, do people have an issue with retail being proposed for the site? I think that that's a question that we need to
Yeah,
answer.
you're not even getting there, I guess. So you can go there, but you can't even get to there because you can't get.
Because you don't have the parking.
You don't have the parking, exactly right. You're not even getting to the
That
question.
wouldn't be a sole reason in my mind to deny the application. I mean, even though I think, you know, you got three in a row and whatever, but so what? I mean, I wouldn't use that. I think the main drivers.
Was the I guess that's what I'm trying to communicate, so that if they choose to come back, they're not seeing the retail use necessarily. Or maybe not, I don't know how John feels about that, that's kind of why I'm asking the question. You know, if they could come back with a plan that corrected the parking relative to the retail use, are you opposed to a retail use?
Yeah, no, we're not opposed to a retail use.
That's,
All right.
that answers my question.
Well, I mean, they're listening to the, at least one representative of the team is here, so I think, it's all on tape. It's all like you mentioned the previous application, Chuck. All the discussion is there for them to winnow through. I don't know if you need to include it in the approval. It's an odd way to, I don't know if that's appropriate to say if
No,
the
I-
parking had been approved, you would consider the use approvable. I don't know if.
No, I don't want to.
Well, I thought you said that there were two requests, so I would say you can approve one request and deny the other.
You can't
But
because
they're
they're
two at
together.
your moving.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Okay, so is that where we'll get probably a written resolution makes more
Yep,
sense?
so I'm taking it as basically the consensus is denial.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
We'll see. Okay, so that's item
We're all
number
going
one.
to change our minds, right?
Right.
Well, the clock is ticking, just so you're aware. I mean, if I prepare a denial resolution and
We can't change our minds?
you change your minds, then you won't have conditions about the lighting and everything else, because I'm not going to do that.
Right.
There's one more meeting, so you've got till the 2nd of April, then,
I'm just giving you a hard time.
yeah, well, thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, so that's it for item number one of old business. Item numbers 2 through 8 are the Bigliotti Todd's Hill Road business, and my understanding is the applicant we voted to
Reopen the public hearing?
reopen the public hearing, and I think that's going to be when?
Well, you discussed doing it on the 5th, that in order to do it on the 5th, we would have had to put an advertisement in the New Haven Register at the cost of several $100s, I think in excess of $500. Talked about that with the applicant, talked about the time frame. I think they wanted to possibly have more time to prepare. So the consensus was they're requesting do it on the 19th, is my understanding. So if you take a motion to modify your previous motion to set the public hearing for the 19th, that would clear everything up.
Is there a motion to modify our previous motion to rescind the close of the public hearing and reopen the public hearing, but schedule the reopened public hearing for our meeting on March 19 at the Senior Center?
Thank you very much.
The Recreation Community Center.
The community house.
Oh, the new
yes, community house.
community
Is the
house.
official.
I'm sorry. Why did I call it Senior?
Because it's not a canoe brook anymore.
It depends who you talk
I thought
to.
it was part Senior Center.
You know, for someone my age, I can get confused very easily on this.
Okay.
Which floor is it on? Is it in the recreation portion or in the senior?
Let's see, I actually have that information. Unbelievable.
So there's a move, is there a second? Second. For discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So that brings us to Thimble Island, number 9, site plan food preparation. There were some issues with that.
We did talk about this last meeting. It's not an application subject to a public hearing. So I don't know if the applicant seems to be here to present more information.
Good evening, Jim Preddy, Friscola Engineering. At the last meeting, Justin Gargano from Thimble Island Brewery was unavailable. Seeing as how we were still on the agenda, we came back. As I recall, it boiled down to the suggestion was a variance for impervious surface coverage over the 7 spots that were created at some time in the recent future. When I explained, recent past, when I explained this to Justin, he says, well, why can't we just take the pavement out and make them impervious? Does that then satisfy this? Because
no.
Quite honestly, you're going to push this into, what'd you say, November by?
Yeah, I mean, so this is my 3rd time up here at this point trying to get this passed. And this is, I didn't do this for the record, but this is kind of my solution just to get something going. I have a small window to do work and I'm running out of time again. I don't want to have to be delayed another 12 months to try and solve 7 parking spaces of issues. So just pretty much asking for folks to take that into consideration. I mean, my thought really was just to kind of put some sort of pavers in there with grass or something that grow through it. It kind of solves both issues. I mean, my understanding of pervious doesn't mean it has to be grass. It just needs to make sure that water can drain right.
Well, we've got a definition in zoning regulations, which reads, the impervious surface area on a lot is derived by adding the area of buildings and structures used in calculating lot coverage, in quotes, to the area covered by parking and loading areas and driveways, whether paved or unpaved. That's the definition.
Of pervious?
The definition of impervious surface area.
So
So
you
it doesn't
basically,
provide for grass pavers.
I think that's an
I'm
over,
not
I
saying
think
that
that's,
this is just what we've got.
I know, I just think that that's because pervious and impervious, from an engineer's perspective, has always, and correct me if I'm wrong, has always been whether water can
I
percolate
don't
into the
disagree
ground.
necessarily, but
Yeah.
we've got our definition that created well before I got here, but that's the definition. So I don't know if that's possible, unfortunately.
I mean, this whole thing is the crux of some interior work that's going on.
Yeah.
There wasn't any proposed site work. I mean, it's an
Yeah.
existing business that's functioning.
It just seems excessive.
I mean, this was here 5 years ago when, I mean, the parking lot was redone not by me.
Yeah, I understand you didn't create the situation, but
I think you're
somebody
gonna-
did
yeah.
it without going through the proper steps, and that's unfortunate.
I mean,
'cause-
if
A lot of things were made though from like talking, or changed from the commission, dealing with the fire marshal, everything was adjusted on here. This one little oopsie was, they did something to fix the wall here that was coming down by the loading dock. I guess they just.
So if he were to take the spaces out and plant grass, then that would be sufficient?
It can't be used for parking, unfortunately, because of the way the definition.
It's a grass island.
Just put grass,
I just
right?
It's a grass island, doesn't have to be
Yeah,
curbed.
but don't you need the parking spaces?
to make the count work? I mean, don't you have an agreement with the sleep center and?
I do. I already have agreements for parking over here, or over there, I forget what it is.
But that's going to
We
be
did
used
go
for
through,
parking.
yeah, we did go through that, and I don't know if they're formal. I mean, they're informal for the patio area, right? Because you need additional parking, so I think the commission, if I recall, when you created the outdoor seating area, they said, okay, that's fine, and you submitted the agreement with the neighboring property, and there's a condition on that approval that if, wait, hang on, let me finish. There's a condition on that approval if that parking disappears in the adjoining property, then you've got to remove the outside seating. That's what I recall. So it's allowed, but that additional seating, if you will, demand for parking is
I don't need the
removable.
number of parking to do what we need to do. We're within it. We can just turn it back to grass, unless you're just trying to stonewall this, but.
I'm just trying to follow the process and the regulations. I mean, I'd love to just wave a magic wand and let you do what you want. It's not, I can't do it that way as staff, and I don't know if the commission can either.
But I'm still not clear. If he removes the spaces and turns it into landscaped area,
Then you lose
lawn,
7 spaces, right?
Yeah, does
But I don't-
losing
I-
7 spaces make his
Site
proposal?
We're within compliance.
Potentially, yeah.
Well, he says are we still in compliance if we do that?
Well, from the last approval, I thought.
That's my question, is just,
Maybe I'm confused by this.
Well, there is let's, again, I haven't really a chance to write anything up, but the argument I understood was that there were 2 additional landscaped islands along Business Park Drive. And the last approval, I think, was for the actual outdoor seating area. There was a schematic submitted that showed the outdoor seating area, and it showed the site as it was then. This is, what, 4 or 5 years ago? It showed the 2 landscaped islands along Business Park Drive as not being there, as being replaced by parking spaces. It showed the other 7 spaces as still landscaped island, landscaped area, grass. So the argument I understood was you guys were saying, all right, implicitly the commission, whether they should have or shouldn't, dissolve those 2 landscaped islands and create additional impervious surface even though it's above the limit, because that schematic was in the application and the commission voted to approve the outdoor seating area. They really didn't focus on the schematic or any changes to the parking area. I think we all assumed the schematic reflected what was in the last approved site plan, which it actually didn't quite do.
so you're saying because of the schematic, we implicitly approved more impervious area on the site?
Right, the 2 along Business Park Drive. So
So-
it was basically
so
a mistake.
taking- Right, but
if you want to
even-
say that that actually happened, that's, the argument.
And were those 7 spaces paved?
No,
On
on
that
that
sketch?
schematic, they were shown as grass.
They were shown as grass.
Right.
So it's a question of 2 other spaces that are now
Yeah.
paved.
So there's 2
as
things.
well.
There's the 2 spaces,
So
which you
can
have to
we-
say, okay, those are okay, if you want to. Say that or we made a mistake and somehow they were approved.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have to look at the numbers, but I don't, that is for the,
Just for the.
but it's
patio.
not an easement or anything, it's not anything permanent. It's a temporary agreement that the commission said was okay as long as it still exists, so that the outdoor seating area is okay as long as that agreement still is effective. But there's a condition on that approval that if that agreement goes away for some reason and it's not an easement or anything permanent, then the outdoor seating has to go away too. To
Right, but-
replace the parking with something else. Well, the only problem is you got a site that's out of conformance with the site plan. So if you took those 7 spaces, got rid of them and made them grass, I think you can go ahead with what you want to do.
So here's one thing I'm scratching my head about. And forgive me, because I don't know the exact numbers. So you have this calculation that you have here, but the other 7, the original plan that was approved 4 or 5 years ago for the actual use, the retail use, the event space use, the manufacturing, warehousing, I mean, it was the second time it came up modified, had 44, 45, whatever the less of the 50-something spaces on here, it was okay. So even if I put this back as grass for non-parking use, why can't I get my approval?
You can.
Right.
Oh, so.
You can, as long as you bring in the conformance with the site plan, and the commission tonight would say those 2 landscape islands along Business Park Drive have been somehow eradicated. That's the other part of it.
Where are those?
It was a sketch that showed 2 little islands.
There was a plan, just for the record too, for the town. I mean, the town didn't have a plan of anything. It's something I found in the building and I brought down that someone asked for a copy of. I mean, I don't even know how old it was. I don't even know if it was the right plan, to be quite honest. It's just that there was no records.
Okay, so if you take out those 7 spaces and make them grass, are you in conformity with the parking? Do you need those 7 spaces?
Well, they would be in conforming. It's not a question of the parking, it's a question of the site. Because you're not actually creating the pizza oven, everything you want to do inside is not creating any additional need for parking. It's an accessory or accessory use to the existing use that's already there. So it's not a question of, it doesn't create any need for more parking. It's a question of bringing the site back into conformance with whatever the actual approved site plan is. So we can go ahead and say, yep, you can go ahead and
Okay,
build
so
pizza.
that is an answer. If we bless the taking out of the landscape islands,
The
and
2 spaces, right, yep.
then
And he takes
then
out
you
the
can-
7 spaces, then you
can
go
do
ahead.
that.
Right, without going back to you. We could just do
Okay,
it as
because
staff.
that brings it in conformance with the existing, the approved site plan, minus the landscape islands, I guess.
Right, exactly right.
So
Okay.
that makes sense.
So that's sort of a compromise.
Okay. I mean, everyone get that?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so then, so what do we have here? We, is this,
So we're making it.
what is the actual what do we approve?
The application is to
What does that
modify
mean?
the site plan, as far as I understand. So right now, it shows removing those 7 spaces. So if you change it, well, frankly, you don't even need this application. So if you recognize that the 2 parking lot islands along Business Park Drive that were not shown on the schematic in the last approval for the creation of the outdoor seating, actually change the approved site plan to eliminate those 2 parking islands, everything is fine after that. They don't need this application, you can withdraw it, and you just have to actually physically eliminate those 7 spaces as part of the pizza oven installation.
So is this the pizza oven? This is what you want to do? This is why
Just
we're
put some
going to?
food in.
Yeah, that's
Yep,
it.
Bring the
just-
pizza
That's it.
oven?
That's it. Been
Okay.
trying for 3 years.
Get some food
Okay.
trucks out of the parking lot, right?
Okay,
He did
so
the right
all you
change.
gotta do is take those, you can withdraw the application, we can acknowledge that the landscape island,
We're never.
The site plan has
yes.
been modified previously to remove those 2 spaces, 2 landscape
Yes.
islands, I mean.
okay, so is that okay with everyone?
Yeah.
Okay, do we wanna get a motion, a sense of the commission that the site plan has been modified to eliminate the 2 landscape islands?
What about the 7 spaces that gotta?
And to remove the-
Treated to grass?
Yeah, and
They're
remove-
gonna have to
Already
put it back
grass.
to grass.
No, to
They're gonna
remove-
have to do that to bring it into conformance. Right, so you understand that, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so, but does everyone agree with that sense
Oh, yeah,
that?
get the guy going.
Okay, so that we got the
Good.
landscape, we're blessing the removal of the landscape
Yes.
islands, and he can just take those out, and you can sell your pizza, right? Is that it?
We're done.
Thank you.
Okay,
Okay,
okay, great.
Do we even have
Yeah.
to vote?
yeah.
Do we have to vote, or that we just withdraw
It
the
should be
application?
reflected in the minutes that we've approved.
Yeah, I
the-
mean, if you want to make a motion,
I make a motion.
Motion to acknowledge
the last approval
The last-
removed.
the last approval removed, the 2 landscape islands.
along Business Park Drive.
Second.
Second, further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Next.
Who seconded? Joe?
Joe Chadwick.
okay. Okay, so that brings us to item number 10, which is coastal site plan grading, and we need to set a public hearing.
Yeah, I would ask that you possibly defer that to me. I'm working out with the applicant whether they want to pay the cost of putting an advertisement into the New Haven Register, which they can, if they agree to that tomorrow morning, we can get it in Saturday, and they're going to have a public hearing on the 19th.
Okay, so we'll defer to Harry as to when, if it'll be the 19th or the April. Okay, that brings us to new business. The time extension request from Bob Harrington is going on for our next meeting, correct?
Right,
Okay.
19th.
And then the planner's memo, planner's report, you passed out the Jim Carito memo request for interpretation. We'll discuss that at the next meeting.
Right.
Anything else, Harry?
Just emphasize again that the next meeting is at the community house. That's-
Yeah. You guys sent an email on that day.
Yeah.
What?
Remind you.
We'll try to do
Remind
that.
me.
I mean, I've never been in there.
I think I have that.
Never
Hang on.
been in there.
No, I didn't know it's, when's the grand opening?
All right, we-
Wednesday, the 12th
A year ago.
at 4:30.
I know it's been open, I just haven't been in.
It's in
John Vinyl.
Pawtucket Room A on the second floor. So you gotta go in from the parking lot side, go up the elevator, and I think there's somebody right in as you go in the bottom floor
It'll be on your
the left. There's a window and a person working behind the window, and they direct traffic basically. So they'll ask you, what are you here for? Oh, you go up here, where do your room is? So all the rooms, I believe, in the senior center part of the building are labeled with the names from the old Newburgh Senior Center. So there's a Pawtucket Room A on the second floor, and that's where we're headed.
Anything else in your planner's report?
Not at the moment.
Anchor Reef, you had sent an email out about an informal meeting, and right now it's looking like it's going to be...
On the 19th.
On the 19th. 19th again is going to be another long one, I guess. But,
yeah.
Goes at this next meeting.
Yeah, and the informal, just to bring you up, some of you weren't there at the last informal. They want to make it all residential. We were strongly encouraging them to do some type of restaurant or open to the public use to open up the back, at least component to it, and I've heard they've had some ideas in the interest, so that's all I know.
So is it apartments or residential condos or?
I think it may be condos, but I don't know if it's apartment or condos. Okay, that it? Is there a
That's
motion?
it.
Okay.
Move to adjourn.
Motion adjourned, is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Brantford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BrantfordTV.org.